Okay, folks. Well, good evening and welcome to the January 18th, 2024 meeting of the Humboldt County Planning Commission. I'm Noah Levy. As usual, I just want to point your attention to page 2 of our agenda, which outlines the ways that you can, sorry, just had to silence my computer. That describes the ways to join the meeting remotely. If you are wishing to participate remotely and you're at a computer, the best way to do that is to join the Zoom meeting, which is there on top of page 2. You can also follow along on Humboldt Access or Access Humboldt or at the humboldt.legstar.com. But if you do that, just note that the feed runs a little bit behind live time, so you'll need to, and you're going to call in, you'll need to call a little earlier than you might think. I need to figure out how to mute my computer. No, it's not that one, it's this one. Laura, can you give me a hand here? Because it seems like this would be the no sound button, but it's not working. Oh, maybe I need... I'm muted on the computer. I'm just hearing it on the computer. So... Sorry about that, folks. Okay, but with that, I would call the meeting to order and invite you to join me in a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Laura, could we please get a roll call of commissioners' present?
Commissioner Skavdal.
Here.
Commissioner Levy.
Here.
Commissioner Landry.
Here.
Commissioner Mulder. Commissioner O'Neill.
Here.
Commissioner Mitchell. Commissioner West.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we have a quorum. Director, are there any agenda modifications you wanted to bring to our attention?
Do not have any agenda modifications this evening. You may have noticed in your supplemental that there were a few letters for the Bush subdivision. Those people, I believe, were in the audience and talked to Mr. Johnson. And he explained what the parcel map was doing and what it would not do, and I believe that they have left satisfied.
Oh, okay. Well, good work, Mr. Johnson. We'll see if there is anyone who has reason to wish to pull that from consent when we get there. Okay, so that brings us to item D on the agenda, which is public comment on non-agenda items. This is the opportunity for anyone in the audience, either in person or on Zoom or phone, who wishes to comment on a matter that is not on our agenda tonight, but is within the purview of the Planning Commission or the Planning and Building Department. Is there anyone in the audience in person wishing to comment on a matter not on the agenda? Okay. Is there anyone on Zoom or phone who wishes to comment on a matter not on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing no hands raised on Zoom, we will close that segment of the agenda. And now that brings us to section E, which is the consent agenda. As usual, I will run through each item on the consent agenda to see if any commissioners or members of the audience wish to pull that for questions or comment or a discussion. So the first item is the October 19th, 2023 action summary. Anyone wishing to comment on that? Okay, the second item is the October 26th action summary. Anyone wishing to comment on that one? Third item is the November 2nd, 2023 action summary. Everybody okay with that? And finally, the fourth, November 16th, 2023 action summary. Okay, and I will just say, thanks, Laura. These were some fairly complicated meetings to summarize, and I thought you did a really good job with these notes. So then the fifth item on consent is the Ghost Ship Investments LLC conditional use permit in the Corbell area. Is there anyone in commissioners or anyone in the audience wishing to comment on that? I do see one hand raised there, so I guess we will pull that from consent and get to that at the end of the meeting. That is how the agenda is laid out, is with the pulled items coming after the sign ordinance discussion. The sixth item on the consent agenda is the Organic Humboldt LLC conditional use permit in Redway area. Anyone wishing to comment on that or pull that for discussion? Okay, seeing no hands on Zoom or phone, we will leave Organic Humboldt on consent. The seventh item on the consent calendar is the Lost Coast Cannabis LLC conditional use permit in the Whitethorn area. Is there anyone wishing to pull that for discussion or comment? Okay, then that will remain on consent. And finally, there's the Bush parcel map subdivision in the Hydesville area. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to pull that for discussion or comment? Or commissioner? Okay. Sure, thanks for that. Okay. Any commissioners wishing to?
I think since we received some public comment, I'd like to pull it, yes.
Okay, sure thing. Yeah, okay. So we'll pull that as well. And so that leaves us with items 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7 on the consent agenda. And I would welcome a motion.
Move to approve as stated.
We have a motion by Commissioner Scavdall,
I'll second.
seconded by Commissioner West. Any further discussion on that before we vote? Then let's take a voice vote. All in favor of approving the consent items, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, motion passes 5-0. And with that, we come now to old business. The one item of old business on tonight's agenda is the sign ordinance. It is a new document tonight, and so we will be taking public comment again from anyone wishing to comment on that. But I think we'll do that after at least an initial presentation by Mr. Dunn. And so, Mr. Dunn, I'm thinking maybe I'll let you give like a kind of overview of the changes to this version of the ordinance. Then I'll see if there's people who in the audience who may wish to comment, and then we'll probably want to go through it, line by line, as it were.
Yeah, that's kind of, I was kind of hoping that might be
Great.
the route we take.
Okay.
So I should be joining the webinar now. If I could just get permissions to share screen. It'd be Jay Dunn. I'm in it. There we go.
Okay, there he is.
Okay. Well, good evening, Commissioners. This is the third meeting. So at the last meeting, we took some comments and recommendations. And so tonight we'll bring back to you alternatives and some examples that would help you in your decision making. So I'll go through the ordinance, the draft ordinance with you, and we'll just run through from start to finish. So let's see, bring that bigger. So to start, we brought back two alternatives for the purpose statement. There's been some back and forth on how we want to approach the purpose statement, and so we've provided the shorter version as well as the original version here. And going down from there, we added a no permit required section for the changing of sign faces, since that was something that we wanted to make clear. And so I added that under the applicability section. And going down from here, nameplates has not changed, neither has temporary signs or property sale signs. And then one of the changes we've made here on appurtenant signage is emphasizing the master sign plan allowance with the special permit so that it doesn't conflict with section 87.2.6.3, and as well as making the permit requirement for appurtenant signage that has no limit on the sizing to be a conditional use permit. This way it would go through a public hearing process and be brought forward to the planning commission to be decided on in cases where signage may be allowed to be larger than what the appurtenant sign table has. So going down from there, we also brought back a portion that would allow a larger footprint for monument signage on the with the master sign plan. So you'll see here that it allows a width of 10 feet instead of 8 and a height of 8 feet instead of 6. And the depth would be increased to 4 feet. Going down there, we changed some language for the maximum on awnings, since that was had the wrong language beforehand. And for wall signage here, we added an alternative 2, which would increase the area to 2 square feet per linear foot of the facade, rather than just the 1 square foot per linear foot. And the language revolving around the window signage, as well as A-frame signage, emphasizing that it cannot be located within a county right-of-way or obstructing ADA access. Finally, on the appurtenant sign table, we created an alternative 2 for freestanding signage. And so you'll see here that we included 1 per business with an area of 36 square feet and a width of 8 feet and height of 14 feet. The clearance for 8 feet is to make sure that it's not blocking public right away, or does not cause someone to run into it, I would say. And down here in the master sign plan, we also included that the increased monument sign size is allowed with the master sign plan. And as asked, we included a section for murals. So the murals would be allowed And it emphasizes that they cannot be used for the sale of product or for the business, it's the selling of the products of the business. And then we also have included a creative sign section. So you'll notice with this section, we took the language from the city of Eureka, and much of the language is very similar. Some of the things that we took out of it included the lighting allowances on some of the signage. So City of Eureka allows for certain lighting as creative signs. And so we took that out because we have sections that include illumination as our design standards and what is and isn't allowed. So the creative sign section is very similar to the City of Eureka and will allow for different types of materials to be used, and they need to follow the general design of what a creative sign may be. And you'll see down here for sign features, materials, and contextual criteria, they have to meet 3 or more of these. And so these all include different things of higher quality materials or different types of projecting signs, ones that may not be square or have a different style to them, as well as ones that emulate the architecture of the building or having artistic illustrations included with the signage itself. So going down from there, we have existing billboards, and so we made some edits to the existing billboard section to emphasize billboards that were located on historic highways that had been built prior to ODA, and so that they are included as being lawfully erected and being covered under this ordinance. And going down, we have included also an alternative for the definition of placement. So with the definition of placement under ODA, they state that re-erection of an advertising display is included as a placement activity. So we have an option here to determine if we want to use the exact language from ODA for re-erection of advertising displays, or if we would like to allow re-erection in certain cases when it doesn't impact the natural environment. But in those cases where it does, we would not allow it. And in the case where a re-erection is, when re-erection is needed, they would still need a building permit with placement. So placement they would be required to get a building permit prior to placement activity. So this is something for you to decide on, I would say, in terms of deciding with the state rules, or if we want to create a exception on our end for placement activities. And coming down from there, we have added the directional sign section, which was directly from the coastal portion of the ordinance. I know this was something that we wanted to include in here as well, so we added this as well. And that would require a special permit. And lastly, I believe the last edit that I have incorporated includes signs on public roads and signs on public property, which was, the language was changed slightly so that it resembles what public works requirements are for having signage on public roads and on public property, and who would authorize those types of signage on in those areas. And so those are the changes that we have made to the ordinance and based on the recommendations and the alternatives that were requested. And so I'll also go through some examples that I know were asked for wall signage to give an idea as to what that would look like. Sorry, 1 second here. So to start, we have Mountain Mike's Pizza. So this is a wall signage you'll see there on the left side of the building. The building has a facade of 85 feet, and with the current language, it would be 1 square foot per linear foot of the facade. The total square footage of the sign that you see there is 70 square feet. So they would have basically in excess of 15 square feet with the current language under principally permitted allowances. That's with alternative 1, just to be clear. And a second example here is on the other side of Mountain Mike's on Central Avenue, you'll see that there's a facade of 105 feet, and the square footage, or the square footage for this sign here is, let's cut off my screen, 78 square feet, I believe. So they are still under as well. Something to note with this is that that sign is located on a roof, so under the prohibited section, roof signs would not be allowed. So that's something to consider when looking at a business like this and what we would or would not allow. But this also does meet the requirement of the wall signage for principally permitted allowances. And going down to American Ag Credit, this signage is a monument sign. They also meet the requirements of the principally permitted table. There's a 4-foot height with an 8-foot width, and the square footage is under the required square footage, or the maximum, which would be 32 square feet. So this one is 20 square feet. And so that kind of gives you an idea as to how big that sign may look with the appurtenant table. Going down from there, we have the Myrtle Avenue Veterinary Hospital, which has a facade of 89 feet, and their wall signage is 17.5 square feet. So they're far below what they would be allowed. And this freestanding sign here, this hasn't been built, so we don't have an image of it after built. But this freestanding sign does meet the requirements of alternative 2 for freestanding in the current draft. The total square footage on this sign is 21 square feet. It's kind of cut off on my screen, but I believe it's 21. And we would have a square footage of 36 with alternative 2. And it also meets the height requirements, which would be 14, and this one is 10 feet. So this kind of gives an idea as to what may be allowed with the alternative 2 for freestanding, and if we were to go with alternative 1, it would require a special permit. Lastly, we have Redwood Community Pharmacy. This one is in a lot that would be part of a master sign plan, but if we were to look at it individually, the approximate length of the facade on this property is 42.5 feet, and their signage is 21.75 square feet. So this one also meets the requirements of alternative 1 for wall signage, and if we were to go with alternative 2 for wall signage, you would have to imagine it would be about, at least with going back to Mountain Mike's Pizza, you could imagine that that sign could be about double the size if we were to use alternative 2 for wall signage. So those are the examples that I wanted to bring forward for consideration and determining what alternatives we want to go with and whether signage is meeting, if it needs to be enlarged, or if we are comfortable with the sizing that we have available for principally permitted allowances. If there's anything else you want me to go back to, just let me know, and that's kind of the end of my discussion.
Yes, Commissioner O'Neill.
You may have discussed this because I wasn't here during other previous discussions, but on obsolete signs, I've put up some signs and they're pretty expensive, some of the costs associated with them, and it says under obsolete that if the business has been unoccupied or not occupied for 6 months, is that going to require you to remove everything or just the wording? Because another owner may come in within a year and want to use the same infrastructure but change the names, and that seems, like a costly to have it removed. It might have cost them $50,000 to build something like you just showed, if it's a freestanding kind of sign or something. So I think 6 months, I'm not sure what you're expecting, if you're just expecting to take the words off, which is sometimes a plastic, piece, but you can leave the basic stuff.
So under the obsolete sign, it says any appurtenant sign face identifying a use or activity. So this would be for sign faces.
So just take off the words,
Mhm.
and you can leave everything else there.
That is correct.
Because it might take longer than 6 months to sell the business and get a new owner in there.
One of the things you may want to think about, if I could, through the chair, is in situations where you have what are called channel signs, where they're like individual letters, and those really aren't reusable. Whereas a can with a face on it would be completely reusable. So probably we would want the individual channel letters taken off, because unless somebody with the exact same name came in there and operated that site, that would need to come
They
down.
might take over the business and want to keep the same name, but I think there should be some discretion between, in the planning department to make an exception, if they should come to you and say, there's a good reason for us not to take it down. I think you should have the discretion in making that determination.
But I think under the intent of the ordinance, it does, it's just not to leave a name up there forever. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it doesn't have to come back to us or something, but I think
Right.
you, within your department, should have that discretion.
Commissioner West and then Commissioner Mitchell.
I just had a quick process question. Sorry if you said this and I missed it. So we are doing questions, then we're doing public comment, and then are we going to go through the alternatives and discuss them and vote on them? Is that the plan?
Yeah, that is the plan. I do want to, get, have the chance to ask initial questions
Yeah.
about the presentation, but then take public comment, and then we will go, more line by line, including but not necessarily limited to the alternatives.
There's definitely something
Burning, someone say burning smell?
It smells like obnoxious fumes.
It does smell weird.
It's not out there.
Yeah, it does have that smell, actually. now that you point it out. Huh. I didn't notice it till just now. Apologies for that delay. I hope with the air purifier going and the fan on that nobody's too disturbed by whatever smell remains. But we're told by facilities management that they think it's associated with the construction happening out in the lobby. So we will pick back up where we were. We have not yet gotten to public comment on this item. I did want to see if there were other initial comments or questions from the commission based on Mr. Dunn's presentation. Commissioner Mitchell, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask a question about adding some areas for discretion for staff to decide if it doesn't exactly meet the standard, but it meets the overall guiding principle that led to the standard. Is it allowable for us to put in, this is a rule and that's a rule? Exceptions can be made to these standards based on, the fact that they do not violate the overall spirit of the guiding principles that led to them. And you would say that in a way that would be probably a lot more polished, but is that type of thing allowed, or do we have to say, oh, we want this exception and that exception?
Certainly you can. This is completely within the discretion of the planning commission to consider how you want to structure the ordinance. The way it's currently structured is that there are basic allowances that are just absolutely permitted by right. If you want to exceed that or do some other things that are beyond that, that's where the special permit comes in. That typically is a staff level decision. And sometimes a public hearing can be waived if notice is given and nobody wants to have a public hearing. But then, as Mr. Dunn mentioned, we also included a new provision that, if even the special permit allowances aren't quite robust enough to capture what you want to do, then you can go to the planning commission with a conditional use permit. And so that's the way it's currently structured, and the basic premise is if you're doing something that is completely in alignment with what the ordinance says, there's an extremely fast process. It's administrative. If you want to do more than that, then there's a little bit more discretion. And if you want to just blow it up completely, then they get to come talk to the planning commission and explain why they need to do that.
And how do we set out which level of staff, being, the zoning administrator, the director, or someone else? How does that authority get delegated?
The ordinance is currently delegating it. So if it's just an administrative level permit, it's just done by staff. That doesn't need to go to the director. Obviously, the director is ultimately responsible for those things, but it's typically a staff level decision.
Well, I actually have a follow-up on that question, though. I see at least one place here in the new text under creative signs that mentions that creative signs shall be reviewed and approved by the zoning administrator. There may be other references to zoning administrator, I'm not certain, but, and this may have been, what Commissioner Mitchell was just asking, and I'm not sure I totally got it, but would the guideline be that if a special permit is required, it would by default come to the zoning administrator unless there is public concern or controversy, or is that not the case? Certainly a use permit would come to the planning commission.
Conditional use permit absolutely comes to the planning commission.
Yeah.
So what we did with the zoning administrator is really substituted the zoning administrator for what the city of Eureka has, which is a design review committee.
Right.
We don't have a design review committee that covers the entire county right now. That could be a different discussion someday, but right now it's just not there. So we used the zoning administrator as a surrogate for that. The special permit is an interesting permit in the county code, because at the most base level, we can send out notices and say, hey, we intend to approve this. If nobody wants to have a public hearing, we're just going to approve it administratively. Mm-hmm. And at that point, it doesn't go to the zoning administrator. It doesn't go anyplace else. There's no comments that come back. And so after that 10-day period, that notice period, it just gets approved.
Mm-hmm. And those notices would go to adjacent.
The normal noticing
yeah.
Requirements, right. And so if we get a request for a public hearing that comes back, that public hearing could go to the zoning administrator. The zoning administrator could decide, it's like, oof, I don't want to touch this, it needs to go to the planning commission. And so there's some discretion in there. If it's something that's just a kind of a technical thing that can be worked out, which we've had quite a bit of success working with neighbors and applicants in hearings to work things out, then it's worked out. If it's something that's just going to be, deadlocked sides in opposition, then that's really the kind of the criteria when it would come to the planning commission.
Okay, that sounds good. That seems reasonable, and I appreciate that there are a fair number of provisions here which, while not principally permitted, can be permitted with a special permit or a use permit. And but my hope was that most of those special permits would not require coming to the planning commission.
I would not envision many sign permits coming to the planning commission.
Yeah. Okay. Well, were there other initial comments or questions that commissioners may want to ask? Yes, Commissioner Scavdall.
Thank you. I just need a clarification. I appreciate that you gave us a no strike-through copy for my dyslexia, so thank you. But one version seems to be missing directional signs, so I just want to be clear. Is 87.2.11 directional signs included?
It should have been included if it's not on both. Let me just double check the other attachment.
it's included in the no strike-through version and not included, I believe, unless I misread this, in attachment 1.
Good catch.
It's not. That was my mistake.
It just
It
dropped
should
out.
have been included in that one as well. It may have been an issue of saving. I was making this one very,
Yeah.
I was trying to make this one the readable copy for the most
Yeah.
part. And so I mistakenly did not include that in the other copy.
So, but the intent is to have that included?
Yes, it is.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, Commissioner Scavdell, can I just interrupt? And so you're seeing it in the no strike-through version?
Correct.
What's the number again?
87.2.11 or 11
Ah,
directional signs. Everything else is included, it just somehow that section dropped.
oh, got it. Yeah.
It's yellow highlighted.
Yes. I admit that I was looking at the strike-through version, so thanks for catching that.
And then I have one other just question or comment. Under prohibited signs, and we talked about this last time, these feather banners, which seem to be kind of fairly common now. And they're listed as prohibitive under decorative signs, except when used as temporary signs, which would mean that you could use those types of signage when you're, say, opening a new business, something like that. But in just observing, I think people are using those more like what we might have used signboards or the sidewalk signs or sandwich boards for. And so I'm wondering if we should include feather banners under those types of signs, like signboards. That means you can use them as long as you put them away when the business is closed and they're not blocking ADA access and those type of things. Or are we just going to prohibit those?
To be included with the A-frame and standing, just to be correct.
That's what I'm wondering if we should do that, or if there's
Okay.
some reason we wouldn't want to do that. Because it just seems there's a preponderance of that type of signage, and it's, my observation, it's not temporary. It says, we're open, or we have coffee, or whatever those are being used for.
Yeah.
So from a policy perspective, I think one of the reasons that we said it shouldn't be a permanent sign is that temporary signage like that is intended to get people's attention, draw them to a new business, perfectly appropriate. But then the question becomes is, this is a kind of an age-old debate relative to sign regulations. Do you want that kind of carnival atmosphere going on all the time as a permanent kind of signage on the street? And I'm thinking of one particular site right now that's down on Broadway that has these feather banners about every 10 to 15 feet all the way around the corner in an intersection, and some of them are hanging over into the right-of-way. And I don't think that's what you're envisioning, but
No, but there are other examples, like a business like the cafe at Fernbridge is only open on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So she puts her banner out to indicate to people that she's open those days because she's closed the rest of the week. So to me, that's not a temporary sign. And it serves a purpose. So that was my only, when I looked at those, I'm like, oh, so we'd be prohibiting that type of a sign for her business. She could put out a signboard that says open,
right.
but she couldn't put out a feather banner.
So from a policy perspective, what I hear you advocating for is not just a ubiquitous allowance of feather banners, but feather banners for a certain purpose, like to indicate that it's open, an open feather banner, or something located near the door that would be used similar to an A-frame, but not as permanent yard decorations that go all the way around the site.
No, correct. I don't know how to draw those lines, but I'm just, again, my question was, should it be like a A-frame sign?
If it was a sign that was put out and removed, and so it wasn't there 24/7, then that would be okay, I would think, because you're advertising a sale that's going on, or that I'm open today, but you have to take it in, or it doesn't blow into somebody's car, or where it's going.
Right, which is what we're requiring for the A-frame type sign.
Right, but as written, it wouldn't seem to allow that. Yes, Commissioner West.
For me, thinking about the case that Director Ford brought forth, it is not like they remove the signs every day and then they put them out again. There is something to the number of signs that really does create a very distracting carnival-like atmosphere. So I think perhaps exploring a limit on 1 or 2 or something like that would maybe help thread that needle. Otherwise, I'm fairly hesitant about allowing feather signs.
The A-frame or standing sign requirement says 2 per business.
I have one question as well. Under the prohibited signs section, I'm basically okay with all of these, and I know I had some questions when we had a last discussion about outright prohibiting digital signs, but I've been persuaded from hearing from more people that, yeah, on balance, I think it's better to just prohibit them. But the one here that I had a question about, and then you happened to show it in your slideshow presentation, was roof signs. You showed the example of Mountain Mike's, which has a sign on, that just above its, on its roof, near the wall, but on the roof. And I could sort of see in that instance, because of the the sort of the various levels of the sort of siding of the building, I can see why it could be a little trickier for them to put the sign along the building wall. I guess I just wanted to ask, I'm less clear what the policy rationale for banning roof signs is than basically all the other items under prohibited.
Yeah, so at least from my experience living in Southern California and seeing a lot of buildings there that do allow roof signage, oftentimes if you end up allowing, or when you see a lot of roof signage come up, you end up with large scale buildings that may be multiple stories. And then if you add a roof sign to that, you're now adding what is similar to a billboard almost, because they usually need a lot more support to be able to be standing on the top of roofs. So it ends up, having more infrastructure on top of that roof, and you're also increasing the size of a lot of these structures, and you're having more like imagery or signage to look up to, especially for drivers and things like that. So there's different reasons and it's different cases. I've seen where roof signs in this case for Mountain Mike's might be less impactful, where other cases it might be more impactful. So at least that's my experience with it.
I appreciate that answer.
Yeah, if
Dr.
I could
Ford.
add a little bit more. And a lot of times too, it, like this one does, starts to interfere with the architecture. Because now you're putting it above like the mansard and the roof there. And so that building was not designed to have a sign there. This is a pad building. That's the back of the building. And it is in the shopping center, for which there is, by a different name, a master sign plan. And so the front of the building with that tower feature on it, the tower feature has actually an allowance to have more signage allowed on that, because that's where the sign's designed and intended to go within the overall design of the center. The other thing that this center would have going for it is it has a monument sign out in front. which would be far more visible. Well, it's not a monument sign, excuse me. It's a huge multi-tenant sign. And so it's got a big space that the individual tenants can rent on out there to provide that accessibility or that visibility to the road. So then the question really becomes, from a policy perspective, is do you want to clutter buildings? Do you want to clutter the architecture of the buildings by allowing signs to be placed where they were not intended to be placed?
Okay.
Follow up to the chair. Is there structural implications with it that is, you're also getting at?
Not really. I mean, anything can be designed, anything can be engineered. It's,
Commissioner Mitchell, do you have your hand up?
I guess I just wanted to respond to Commissioner West and say that after considering what all of you have said, I'm concerned about not restricting new technologies, but also recognizing that the ones we're prohibiting could potentially cause distraction for drivers. So how do we not prohibit too many things, but also allow flexibility for future technology without having to bring this back every time there's a new type of sign?
I would just kind of point out that a lot of what we're doing now has to do with what we're really trying to protect and the things that were issues when we started this. Scenic quality is very high on that list. Night sky lighting is very high on that list. And related to those, trying to integrate signage into the appropriate built environment. I mean, it used to be in the 1950s, you know, the design of signs was intended to pull people in off the road. So you would see huge signs. New technology now, the only thing you really need a sign for is to say, you know, Siri brought you to the right place. And I'll give you an example of that. I was in Santa Rosa one day, and I don't know if you've ever been to the Home Depot there, but I was looking for the Home Depot, and it's not immediately visible, and pulled it up on Google Maps, and it says it's right there. And then you look right there, and there's a little sign that says Home Depot up the hill. You know, the alternative to that is to have a huge sign up on top of the hill saying Home Depot's here. And so it really comes down to the Planning Commission needs to ask the question is, what do you want to achieve with the sign ordinance? Are you trying to protect certain resources while balancing the needs of the local economy? Or is it just really a matter of trying to permit signage? And the way this has been structured is to address some concerns we have with protecting the scenic resources of the county, protecting the night sky, and trying to integrate signage into the built environment.
Okay, did you have a? Go ahead.
So in terms of visual impacts like we would address in a formal EIR, how are we making sure that scenic vistas or already areas that have visual blight or other types of overuse of signage when there weren't such stringent regulations don't become overburdened with this level of signage? I guess, how do we decide how much is allowable from a CEQA perspective, and how do we make sure that as the county differs in different areas and is more rural or more urban, that this set of guidelines directly would mitigate anything from a CEQA perspective?
So I would offer one of the things that the sign ordinance should be is self-mitigating. And so, like when you're talking about those types of scenic resources, you're typically talking about areas outside the built environment, which would largely deal with billboards. So the policy decision there really is related to not allowing new billboards, and then the choice that Mr. Dunn provided tonight, which is, do we strictly follow the Outdoor Advertising Act and say, you know, if the billboard goes down, it's gone, it's not coming back? Or are there circumstances where we would allow the billboard to be reconstructed? But other than that, no new billboards. And perhaps one of the things that you would want to add into that list of things, if you do choose alternative 2, is in addition to wetlands and sensitive environments, is scenic areas.
Commissioner O'Neill.
Two things. One, I think signs can be very expensive. They can be $50,000 to $150,000. And if you're a small business that, you know, is just barely getting by and wants to promote
Peggy,
your
can you talk more into the mic? Thank
If you're
you.
a small business, using a banner that doesn't cost you very much, as long as you're not flapping them all over the building, but if you're putting them out and taking them to advertise a sale or that you're open, I think that should be allowed. Maybe there's a limit. I also, under murals, it says you can't have the name of the business. And one of my favorite murals in Eureka is the one in Henderson Center that had the name Finnegan and Sons on it, and it was of a historical depiction of the building and the, you know, and I think that if it's used in that type of context, a historical depiction of the name should be allowed.
Now,
I think we would say at that point, that's a creative sign.
yeah,
Okay.
that's what I was
But
going to say.
just by saying you can't put the name of a business on there, I mean, it's no longer, I think it was Finnegan and Sons, it's no longer there, but at the time it was put on the building, it was the same building, and that was the name of their business. It isn't anymore, but if it's depicting a historical scene or, you know, many businesses in the area, I think it should be, there should be some discretion there and not just say, can't put the name on there.
Yes, if I may. So with the murals, it wouldn't be considered a sign at that point. The murals section is meant to kind of,
Right, but the mural says that you cannot have advertisements include text displaying the name of a business. And so someone might say, well, you can't put the name of your business on there, but wait a minute, I'm drawing the, you know, that corner, what it looked like.
so then they could apply for the creative sign.
So they could still do that under the next provision,
Okay.
creative signs,
I get it.
is what I hear them saying. So
Okay,
it's considered a sign, but it has more leeway, you know, can be larger, can be artistically
okay, as
interesting.
long as it's not prohibited entirely.
Yeah.
I could just add
Sure.
something. The way the sign ordinance is currently constructed is nothing is prohibited entirely except the list of prohibited signs.
Okay, I'm thinking maybe this is a good place to go to public comments, and then we will come back and go through many of the details. But if you could give me back my, or stop screen sharing for a moment so that I could see the who's on Zoom and phone. Okay. I will first open public comment for the audience in the room and invite anyone who is here in person who wishes to comment on any aspect of the sign and billboard ordinance to please go ahead.
Hello, good evening. Jennifer Calt with Humboldt Waterkeeper. I'm glad to finally be here and speak on this. It's been, I think this is the 4th hearing, but almost happened. So it's very exciting also because we've been working on billboard issues for about 15 years and went to many, many hearings in the general plan update process. And so this is great to finally see this ordinance be coming to fruition. So we strongly support the list of prohibited signs, including digital signs. And as Director Ford said, there was wild support in the general plan update hearings from many, many people, including a wide range of commissioners from Ralph Faust on one end of the spectrum to Dennis Mayo on the other, for protecting the night sky in particular and how important that is to people in Humboldt. And then, of course, scenic areas, coastal areas are really important. We also strongly support the disallowing of re-erection of fallen billboards on wetlands, bodies of water, like the one that has fallen down that used to be in Humboldt Bay that would never be allowed to be built today and should not be allowed to be re-erected. It is a coastal scenic view area. And I noticed that alternative, I think that set of alternatives is not included in the coastal version of the ordinance. And so I would put forth the idea that it should not be, you shouldn't allow re-erection of signs on wetlands in the inland areas. I think I maybe said that in a little confusing way, but anyway. Also, the lighting standards, we wrote a letter about this back in October, and the lighting standards in the draft are very weak. They don't really seem to mean very much. And we strongly recommend that you consider including the policies from the city of Eureka on brightness and illumination. And these were policies that were accepted by the Coastal Commission. And this is all very important to protecting not only the night sky, but also protections for wildlife and, generally for, keeping the glare out of drivers' eyes. I was coming in from McKinleyville listening on the phone and saw that the lights behind the Target are glaring right in your face in this otherwise very dark area right over Eureka Slough. I realize it's not in the county, this is in the city, but that's just an example of why the lighting standard should be much stronger than just, it says something like they shouldn't be brighter than necessary, which I don't even know what that means. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Good evening, Michelle McKeegan. I'm chair of Keep Eureka Beautiful, and what we do normally is plant street trees, but this is really an issue that we care about a whole bunch, and I guess I would not force you to listen to the whole list again, but Jen has been very clear. Certainly, the issue of re-erecting down signs is important to us, and certainly the issue of the night sky being protected, and certainly the protection of our scenic resources. So I would urge you to move in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others in the room wishing to comment on this item? Okay, then I will close the in-person public comment, but we do have some people on Zoom and phone. I see one hand up. That is Jeff Wills. So go ahead, Mr. Wills. You can have 3 minutes. And I'm not able to hear you yet. Did you, it says you're muted now. Now you're unmuted.
Yeah, sorry, it was a slow prompt.
Okay, good. No, we can hear you now.
Yep. All right, thank you guys. My name is Jeff Wills. I own All Point Signs. I am the only licensed sign contractor in our county. And I've been in the sign industry for 17 years up here. I've tried my best to work with Jacob and John on getting our principally permanent sign table here to essentially fit the norm of what businesses are going to need, because we don't want to have every business needing to get a special permit. And as written, I mean, I would call this sign code woefully inadequate for standard signs that standard businesses need. I can go through every single table, and I've done it multiple times and emailed suggestions for what would be a standard sign size for each of those. And it's been ignored each time. So I can safely say I'm speaking for almost every business in Humboldt County, because they all use my company for their signs. This is not a good sign code. This does not cover the needs of the signs that the community uses that are standard signs. And it just doesn't work. I would label this sign code as how Humboldt County doesn't want businesses to succeed. In the banned and prohibited signs, I'm glad Noah mentioned that, because on Jacob's presentation, he showed what he called a wall sign as an example of a sign that would be allowed, but he was actually showing a roof sign, which is prohibited for some reason. I do not see any rhyme or reason why we need to absolutely ban and prohibit roof signs. I do not see why we need to prohibit exposed illumination of bulbs. Those are generally on the higher end signs. I do not see why we need to completely ban neon or neon looking signs. Those are, commonly used like renters' canopies. Every single one of their canopies has faux neon around it. That just doesn't seem like the type of sign that needs to be banned in our county. I'm very concerned with the billboard ordinance that looks to strip property owners and billboard owners of basically their livelihood and their assets by not allowing them to be rebuilt. We made a compromise with the county. The original general plan had in it for us to be able to reconstruct our billboards. It actually had in it to allow for new billboards. We weren't even trying to do new billboards, so we offered that as a compromise that, no one I know of wants to build new billboards. I certainly don't. We just want to keep our status quo and keep our investments going to serve ourselves and serve our business community. So I think, in my opinion, and again, I've been in the sign industry for 17 years, this is not a workable sign code for us to move forward with. It needs revisions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else on Zoom or phone wishing to comment on this item? Okay, seeing no other hands, we will close public comment and bring it back to the commission. So we could go back to Mr. Dunn and go a little bit more deliberately through the alternatives. Certainly those require discussion. Actually, I'm just realizing it is 7:15. Are folks by any chance wanting to take a short break before we get back to that? Okay, sure. We'll have, I see at least one person saying yes, so let's take a 10-minute recess and then we will get back to walking through the document with Mr. Dunn. To reconvene. Okay, coming back into session, I'm sure Commissioner Mitchell will be back here any minute. So I wanted to suggest, Mr. Dunn, that we walk through this a little bit more slowly, and certainly we'll talk about the alternatives, but really anything else along the way as we go through it that commissioners have a particular question or comment about, let's just flag it and try to go through it in order. Does that make sense?
I would like to hear, as we're going through it, some of the concerns that the recent speaker brought up that he's brought to your attention but hasn't changed, if you have any insight on that as we go through it.
Yes, I can do that.
Okay. Oh, and Cliff, can we close that door now, as long as it's not locked? I know Brian will be back. Thank you so much. Okay, so yeah, go ahead. Start us off, I guess, with alternative one, since that's right at the top.
There we go. Yeah, so starting with alternative one, this is the shortened version based on the first hearing we had, and we were asked for some edits there. So we came back with this. At the second hearing, we came back with alternative one. And during that second hearing, it seemed like there might be some interest in going back to what the original text had said. So we brought back the original text as an alternative 2, so to give some context to those two options.
What are people's thoughts on that?
I like two, except for I don't like the use of the word viable business because I think that's subjective. How do you know if it's viable or not, you know? And because the reason why I don't like one so much is a sign is also to promote economic success and prosperity within the county. That's the whole purpose of a sign. So I think that, you know, we should be not saying, well, your business isn't really economically viable, so you don't need a sign or something, you know. The sign might make them economically viable.
Do you have a suggestion about how you would
That
change?
supports economic success of businesses serving the county residents. You know, you also have signs that promote health, like, you know, it might be a sign telling you you can get a flu vaccination, or, you know, wear, you know, use a car seat or whatever. There could be different kinds of signs, but I think signs promoting the success of the economy are not saying a viable, because that's like, who's going to decide that?
Chair, if I could.
Yes.
What if we just removed economically viable?
Right.
So it just says supports business serving county residents,
Right.
workers, and visitors.
Right, the success of, or whatever, you know, I mean.
I'd be fine with that. Other thoughts?
I'm fine with that as well, and I like alternative 2 over alternative 1. If we're not going to have a statement in there that signs are to support business, then not sure why we need a sign ordinance or signs. So,
Yeah.
so I like the proposal by Peggy and Chair to drop the, or the Director to drop economically viable.
Commissioner West?
I share the same sentiments as Commissioner Skeptal.
I will say I also agree with that. Anybody feel differently? Want to make further edits to the second alternative there? Okay, well, that seems pretty easy. Then I think we will go with alternative 2, or the second version of it, but with that small change to remove economically viable from the 4th bullet.
Correct. So moving down from there, we have the addition of the no permit required section for sign faces.
Sorry, I'm just, well, go ahead and you can say that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say that I heard you say about adding a word in place of that.
You might not think it's viable, but I do, and, you know, and I should be given a shot at it. So I just don't like that word, because I just think it's subjective.
So just to be clear, we removed it and not changed it on our vote. So is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We actually didn't vote, but maybe we should just do a quick sort of voice vote straw poll, since we have it as a formal alternative. All in favor of,
You're going to have to change the word economically, because it's not going to make sense.
I think we were instructed to remove economically viable, so that instead it reads supports business serving county residents, workers, and visitors.
Yes,
Is that correct?
yeah. All those in favor of that revised version of the second alternative, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, just so we're on the record. Yes.
So so the next section here is the no permit required section to allow existing sign faces, or allow sign faces to be changed without a permit.
I have a question. Does that mean the actual structure, or does it also mean the wording on the front of it?
This would be just for the wording, just for the face of the sign.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a billboard and you want to change the face of it, or if you sell a business and you want to change the words, you have to come back for a permit?
Those are two separate questions.
Okay.
The face of a billboard, nope, those change all the time without any kind of permit.
Okay.
What this is saying is that you can change the face of an existing sign without a planning permit.
Okay,
You just go straight to building permit to get that face changed.
okay.
So it does require a building permit?
Yeah.
Just to change, even if the structure remains unchanged? Okay. Okay. Any other questions on that point? I have just a small question under nameplates, which I know has not changed recently, but in reading it again, I just wonder if it's a little confusing to say in any zone, one nameplate not exceeding 2 square feet, but then in certain zones, one nameplate not exceeding 4 square feet, and in certain others, not exceeding 20. Might it just be logically clearer to put the first one last, so that, you know, sort of in all other zones? Because I think that's what it means, is if you're not in RS, R1, R2, et cetera, or the other listed zones, then you can't exceed 2 square feet.
Yeah, we could do that.
You see what I'm saying? I mean, I think people can figure out what it's meant to mean, but it just struck me as cleaner to do it the other way around.
Yeah, this was using the previous language that existed, so
Okay.
I can change that if that's what the commissioners
I
would like.
mean, unless anyone disagrees, I don't mean to be dictatorial about it, but okay, thanks. And then, yeah, you know, Peggy, Lonix, I don't remember if you were, I don't think you were here either. So I just want to be clear, even though Jacob may not have, you know, only the highlighted sections were changed from the last time. If there's anything on the next page that doesn't have highlights, but you have questions about it, any of us should feel free to raise your hand.
I just wanted you to introduce concerns from the sign person that you're aware of that was brought up, but you didn't change them.
Oh, now?
Well, as you go.
Yeah, but-
If you're aware of any that you can recall.
When we were getting to the permanent sign table, I was
Okay,
going
all
to
right.
touch on that a little bit.
We'll bring up, though, that since we're moving down in temporary signs, we increase the size of those based upon the input of Mr. Wills.
It could work both ways, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Well-
Chair, did we want to get consensus on the addition of the no permit required?
Oh, okay, sure. I suppose that would make sense. As we go through changes, we'll make sure that, you know, we'll get a voice vote to approve that. So maybe we can bunch things together, but since that first one you just highlighted about the no permit required, everyone in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Great. So moving down into temporary signs, and as the director has stated, we did increase the size on these with some suggestions that came from Jeff Wills as well. So this is what we have now. I'll just keep going down to property sale signs here. These have also, I wish I had my previous draft. The property sale signs has not changed. This is still the original, so there's that there. And moving down from that, we have the appurtenant sign section. So we included the exception for sites that utilize the master sign plan, and as well as the conditional use permit for signs that would be permitted without a limit on the sizing.
Sorry, that would be permitted without a size limit
That is correct. There would be no limit to size.
for, I just missed the beginning of that. That, for what?
So signs that are not consistent with the appurtenant sign table, they may be permitted with a conditional use permit.
I see. And there's no, then
And there
there's no
would be no
default
limit.
limit on what that size could be.
That is correct.
Okay, got it. Well, is everybody okay with the changes at the bottom of 3, top of 4, where there's the new language, except where the sign utilizes a master sign plan consistent with section, et cetera, and the continuation of that, they've added with a conditional use permit and then removed the size limitation. Everybody okay with that? All right. I think if we have just head nods and no questions or comments, then we'll just say that's good.
Great. So moving down into the appurtenant sign table, something we were asked to bring back was a size allowance for monuments, increased monument sign size for sites that have the master sign plan permit. And so you'll see there, it's still 1 per frontage, and the size that's been increased is the width, height, and depth.
Did anybody have a comment on that?
Well, so I think this is where public speaker, Mr. Wills stated that, if I wrote this down correctly, standard sign sizes in our appurtenant table don't work for the market or industry or in some way. I don't know. I don't have that detail, but I guess my question, similar to Commissioner O'Neill's, it's hard for me to make a determination if I don't know how far, or how much space is between what we're proposing in this ordinance and what Mr. Wills is saying, the market would like to see. I don't know what that delta is, so it's hard for me to understand if, wow, we're getting 90% of the requirement, for example, and some signs will have to apply for a special permit, or if he's suggesting every sign would have to apply for a special permit because we're so far off of the mark here. So I'm just trying to get that scale. If you can help with that.
Well, in my PowerPoint, I showed some examples there. One of them included a monument size sign that does meet the requirement of the alternative or the standard monument sign size that would be principally permitted. I have not seen substantive information of other monument sign sizes that are the standard, that are much larger than that should be the standard or ought to be the standard. They would still be allowed to get a larger monument sign if they were to go through a permitting process. But I think in terms of deliberation among the commissioners, looking at the example that's been presented and whether that seems like a adequate size or if that should be increased, that was meant to kind of provide you with an opportunity to decide whether larger is better or if we should continue down the path of the size that we have allowed here.
But I think the question is, if it says 4 by 10 and the comment where the standard is 8 by 12, that's kind of where I don't know what the standard is.
So let me just say, there's a couple things to really think about here. One is that sign companies can build signs to whatever size a jurisdiction decides is appropriate. So part of the question that's being asked of the commission is to think about what do you want in terms of freestanding signs, monument signs that are along the street frontage. Is it still desirable to have 20, 25-foot tall signs that are 300 square feet?
I get that, and you don't want to be gaudy and all that, but you also don't want to harm businesses, and maybe we don't care, and we just want signs to be smaller, but I don't know the difference here.
I agree with that, but I think it's a difference in perspective on what helps business. Because one of the ironies, at least as I drive around and look at signage, is that if you've got a 25-foot tall sign, you're looking up at it, trying to see it out of the top of your window.
And I get all that. I just want to know the difference. Like, if we're reducing them 10%, then big deal.
No, this is substantial reduction. Can you, off the top of your head, I was about to look it up, can be built for a freestanding sign right now?
Right now,
Right now. What's the limitation for a freestanding sign right now?
it would be based on the size of the frontage, so,
I know you've been patient.
So it's basically up to 300 square feet?
yeah, dependent on the zoning. So, let's see, for commercial,
While you're looking, let me just kind of try to restate my concern. I don't have an issue with telling a sign company that they need to make smaller signs. That's not the issue. My concern is that public speaker said that he had met with the county or submitted documents several times showing the difference between what we're showing in our standard and what they'd like to see. And I don't recall seeing that evidence having been submitted to me as a commissioner that shows what that public speaker is saying they submitted. So I'm having a hard time figuring out how far off the mark he thinks we are.
just
So I
to be
just don't
clear,
have
You
that
guys hear me?
information.
just to be
I
clear,
emailed a very detailed PDF about it.
Hey,
Can you
actually,
hear me?
Mr. Wills, we've closed public comment, so I'm afraid yeah.
just to be clear, I was sent one email with with information about some ideas as to what size the signs should be or could be based on Mr. Will's experience with sizing on signs. I'm trying to pull up the email here to see what it is, but
So that's a document that we would have received or that we received 3 meetings ago or so.
that is something I can include on the next, if we go to a hearing next,
Yeah.
but
I think one of the things maybe we should do is to go back and prepare a table showing what the existing ordinance would allow, what the proposed ordinance would allow, and then allow you to see the actual differences between what's existing and what's proposed and the circumstances under which they would be approved. I hear your struggle, that you don't want to be arbitrary and that you want to have something to kind of latch on to be able to make a decision, and that's perfectly fair.
And I think the picture, like when you showed Mountain Lakes, and if you said, here's Mountain Lakes, what it would have been, what it could be, that one picture would almost do it for me, because I'm a very visual person, but I just don't know. Just say, is an 8x12 sign normal, or is it not?
Well, could I?
Yeah,
respond to
but then
that?
I want to let Commissioner Mitchell speak.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner O'Neill, is that one of the things I'd like to say is, I don't think there is a normal sign. Everything is circumstantially dependent. It's largely dependent upon the design of the building, what fits into the building, what fits into the street frontage, where it's going. One of the things I was trying to get to earlier when I was talking to you, and this is something to think about, is that as you're driving down the street, your line of sight is at the street level. That's where the most visibility is, except for way, way down the street. But do you want to design signage to be seen from a mile away? And that becomes part of the question here, is what are we asking signs to do? Are we asking signs to identify when you're very close to a business, at the business? Or are we asking signs to let the traveling public know from a great distance?
I don't have a problem with saying signs need to be smaller. I just don't know what smaller is.
I understand that. But there is a balance there, and we'll try to help you think through that with some.
I just want to know
some
if this
different
business
things.
is open when like today I stopped at a business, got out of my car, went to the door and it wasn't open, That's what I want to know, even though it might say online, when I Google it, that it's open, it may not be. So,
I-
you know, and then the roof thing, you can make a ledge that's not the roof that, you know, you can put, people can be creative, I guess, about doing roof signs, but I just don't have a perspective, I guess. I'm not that well-versed in signs to know what is, okay, well, we're gonna be cutting them down, but, you know, by 50%, basically.
So I do have the images pulled up to show from Jeff Wills,
But I
if
think
you
he
would
had a
like me to share that.
Sure, but Brian's been very patient, so I'd just like to let him get his comment or question in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in hearing other commissioners express their concerns, it's brought into focus some general concerns that I've had and helped me sort of encapsulate that into one question, which is, how do we as commissioners make sure that we're not making decisions arbitrarily? Typically, we would have an environmental impact document or something else that would guide us in terms of making findings and whether or not the evidence presented we're able to make those findings. And in this case, I'm just curious, when you say that we want to reduce distracted driving or certain things that were listed in the goals, I'm not really sure how to make the nexus between what we're listing as our goals and these proposed regulations. With pushback from the industry, it sounds like we've moved them, and I don't know how to judge whether or not those movements are sufficient. So I guess, how do we do this on an evidence-based basis?
I understand your question. I was probably taking too much for granted that there was probably more experience thinking about things like signs. You know, this is probably something that at least I've been thinking about for a long, long time, because it's endemic to the job. And I understand your desire to want to make a decision based upon some empirical evidence that lands a decision based upon some factors, and we'll endeavor to provide that. It still will be ultimately a policy decision about where do you want to land in terms of just allowing things by right. Mm-hmm. And where do you want to land in terms of giving some additional discretion. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry we have not given you enough information to land on, and we will go back and prepare some comparisons so that you can see exactly what it is that the existing sign ordinance does and does not do, because many of the signs that are now allowed aren't actually allowed in the existing sign ordinance. All the things like the temporary signs that you were talking about, those aren't currently allowed at all. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of signage being proposed here that is now allowed that's not currently allowed. And I think that overall what you'll want to do is weigh, you know, what this is trying to do. And admittedly, the proposal is on the more conservative end. And, you know, we are not going to have our feelings hurt by enlarging the areas or anything like that. But what's being proposed here is not untypical for other areas in California to greatly reduce sign area. Mm-hmm. And so we can also, you know, identify maybe statistically where other jurisdictions land in terms of the sign area that they allow, so that you can kind of have an idea of, are we an outlier here? Are we overly restricting business, or are we kind of following a general trend within the state?
Follow-up for Commissioner Mitchell and Commissioner West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to add that, you know, this is a very unusual type of ordinance for us to consider, and typically we're more of a land use-based commission, and in this case, it's land use but for a purpose that feels environmental or that there's a current problem. And so if we could document either in the style of an environmental impact report that would relate just to signs only, you know, what are the problems that are existing with the current ordinance, or what problems are we hearing about that aren't solved by the current one that this would? I think that type of thinking would help us get to a place where we can make evidence-based decisions. And I was just curious also if you're going to compare us to other jurisdictions, that we state those in the assumptions that this is an amalgamation of, these 3 cities that we feel are similar to Humboldt when synthesized because, and then the rationale. That type of evidence would help me feel comfortable that these numbers are things that we can feel comfortable recommending to the Board of Supervisors. Thank you.
Commissioner West?
I'm not sure I'm quite on the same page as you with that. I definitely lean more conservative in my sign thinking. I find them to be, I really value the rural charm of Humboldt County, and signs are very tricky and very easily distracting from that rural charm, particularly since this is a county ordinance and we're considering more suburban and rural areas than we are, say, the core of Eureka. I lean towards being more protective of our aesthetics and being really cautious about how we let the market if we let the market dictate how big signs are, they're going to be, I think Commissioner Scavdall made this point at our last meeting, they're going to be big because the market will support that. And I think we also need to consider our community's interest in the aesthetic quality of the area. So I just wanted to, I think, say my support for what's been put here and considering, I really like how thoughtful we are with being conservative and then having decision points get kicked up to higher levels of examination and consideration when people want to, we're limiting very little in the way of activity. There's just more scrutiny and more decision points if you want to get a little bit more big and splashy.
Yes, Commissioner Landry.
So I've never been one who's been much of an interior nor exterior decorator. I do appreciate our night skies. I do appreciate the aesthetics of a natural landscape. That being said, and I don't think that by minimizing some of these signs that we're going to doom business in Humboldt County. I don't necessarily agree with that. But I do like a lot of the points that Commissioner Mitchell's making to help us make some of these decisions. And I liked what Commissioner Scavdale was pointing out. Like the way I heard his original question was, so how much of a difference are we doing? And I feel like Director Ford kind of answered that. Yeah, we're shrinking them down, and was really candid about that. I appreciate that too. So I do like what Commissioner Mitchell was getting at, and it's also not necessarily my forte.
Okay, Commissioner O'Neill, sure.
I think you can, I'm not opposed to shrinking signs and to be more, aesthetic to a certain theme, but there is none. So, but I would just like to see, well, here's what we have now, and under our new ordinance, this sign would go away, and this one would shrink to this size. And so visually, we could say, well, maybe we want it to be less, maybe we want to be more restrictive or less. I don't know, because visually, I just can't, it's hard for me to look at this and go, what kind of change are we making? And one picture would probably be enough for me to go, like, this sign goes away, this one would shrink to half size, or maybe it's just a very small change, and maybe we might want to say, well, wait, we want more than that. And I'm all for the night sky protection, and, I'd like to see a neon open and close sign. I don't want those to go away, but, in a window. And I'm not opposed to having someone put up a banner if it means just to say they're open or closed and it goes away at night. I don't think we should be so restrictive that affordable options aren't there for very small businesses that can't afford the $50,000 sign. They can only afford the $99 banner, but it might make a difference for a small business that's kind of has off hours and stuff. I just don't want to do extreme harm to businesses, but I don't like signs either, that are gaudy and huge and all that.
Okay. Commissioner Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just, I guess, wanted to respond to a few of the other comments and say that I very much agree with protecting the night skies and all of these things. And I'm just having a problem not knowing whether or not we are proposing restrictions that are too restrictive or not restrictive enough. And so I guess the concerns I would like to ask, in addition to what I mentioned, is also, at some point, is a sign the same thing as free speech, and is regulating it potentially an area upon which we need to tread very carefully? And if it is, I guess, how did we make sure that we stayed on the right side of the legal system? Because we want this to be something that we put in place one time, and that if challenged would be absolutely affirmable or not challenged.
Size, design, location are all things that can be regulated. Copy and content cannot.
Which is part of what I think I heard you say last time would be so challenging about allowing digital signs, but only the ones that don't change or don't change too often.
Only the
aren't
ones
too-
we like.
Right. It's right. So I'm not pushing that anymore. But okay, I do. This has been a good discussion. I think we're actually maybe saying similar things. But Mr. Dunn, you had said you had found. Okay, so in not in lieu of a more complete exposition, which it sounds like we're going to get at a subsequent meeting. But if you have some examples that you found that could show us, what's been done, what size it would be or wouldn't be allowed now, or something like that. I'm not sure how much you found, but
I have Jeff Will's
Okay.
submission of images of signage.
So is it appropriate to show some of those?
We can, but I'm wondering right now the value of trying to do this independent of putting a more comprehensive presentation together. So one of the things I'm thinking is including Jeff Will's wish list, desires, if you will, in conjunction with what's currently allowed, what the sign ordinance proposes, and then maybe an amalgamation, to use, I think, Commissioner Mitchell's term, of what other jurisdictions predominantly would allow, and allow the commission to kind of see all of that information together.
I think so too. I think giving you the time to do it in a more systematic way makes sense. And there's still a fair amount that we can talk about in the draft, so that we could get closer to resolving the questions that are outstanding, I think. So thank you, Mr. Dunn, but I guess we'll wait on the images till we have something put together. Okay. And those, just to be clear, I think what we're talking about is essentially illustrations of and side-by-side specs regarding sizing and allowances for the various, for the appurtenant sign table, basically, right?
Could you repeat that, please?
Well, just so we, I think, are clear about what you're proposing to bring back to us, the illustration of standing examples of comparisons of what's currently allowed, what would be allowed here, what other jurisdictions may do, those would be pretty much oriented to the appurtenant sign table. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think we'll include, to the extent that we can, the entire sign ordinance.
Okay. But it seems to me that that's where most, although not all, of the specific size and limitations are, to be found. So, okay. Yes, so I think we'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Dunn. There are a couple of other changes made, well, several changes that are in the appurtenant sign table, which we may still want to talk about now, even though we're going to get more information about that later. For instance, okay, under awning, that was just the correction of a typo that said minimum should have said maximum. But then under wall signs,
Could we get the share screen up, please?
oh, great, yeah. Under wall signs, you have put in an alternative based on our last discussion.
That is correct. And I've shown examples where every single wall sign that I've shown has met the alternative 1 requirement.
The smaller requirement.
Yes, that is correct.
Thoughts about that?
Yeah, the only thing I would like to see on the wall signs is, but not larger than, so a maximum size. So for example, I'm thinking like a big warehouse, let's just say Costco, has a 300-foot wall. I don't think they should have a 300 square foot or a 600 square foot sign. So if we could just define the maximum sign size for a wall signs, I think that should go in here with alternative 1 or 2, whichever ones we select.
Okay, yes, Commissioner West.
I really like that idea. I think that's a great addition.
I agree with that as well. I guess as a point of process, do we want to discuss or even vote on this particular alternative at this time, or do we want to wait until we get more information?
Given the fact that we are going to be coming back with information on this, you may want to wait on this.
Yeah, okay. That would make sense.
But we will take your direction, because I do hear that there's consensus there to have a maximum square footage for a wall sign.
Yep.
To clarify, would that include for conditional use permit projects that are sites that are requesting conditional use permit for increased sign signage?
Well, was that your intention, Commissioner Scavdall?
No, not necessarily. I think signs that are going to get a special permit or a conditional use permit kind of fall under a different
Yeah.
element. This is just for over-the-counter permits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
That would be my thinking as well. Okay.
So moving down, we have just a few additions to window and A-frame signage here, and then there's the alternative for freestanding, but if we want to wait to make decisions on those, I can move down to the sections after that, or master signs plan section.
Yeah, no, I think that one will be particularly useful to be able to see examples that do or don't fall within those size limits.
Okay. So moving into master sign plan, the addition that was made here was for the increased monument sign size, which we will come back with examples for different sizes for those monument signs. And then after that, we have the mural section, which was added after recommendations for it.
Really like that.
Excuse me, Chair.
Oh, yes, Commissioner Scavdall.
Sorry, we jumped ahead before. I just want to go back to the A-frame and standing and confirm. Did we agree
Sure.
that we were going to allow these flag banners to go in this section or not?
Yeah, we'll bring those back with some limitations on number and location.
Thank you.
Okay, good, thanks.
So for murals, are we at consensus that we would like to keep murals the way it is?
Anybody have contrary views on that?
Just my previous comment about when was historical, and they did have the name of the business on there because it was had been there for 50, 100 years or whatever, that should be allowed. And I don't know how to say that, but when you had a historical mural, say, of Eureka, and it has the name of those historical businesses on it, that shouldn't be considered necessarily outlawed under this restriction.
So if I could, for clarity, if you had a mural that had historical businesses on it that was not necessarily advertising that business, that's a mural, that's fine. If you're putting in the name of the business on the wall where the business is, that then is a creative sign and would be considered under the following provision.
And you're saying that to me, and I understand and I believe you, but
Right.
what if we're not around and the next person comes along and interprets it to be, you can't do it? So, because it says you can't do it here. It doesn't refer to go to the creative section to get, you know.
So would it be better to identify that within the creative signs that, you know, a mural and creative artwork that's incorporating the name of the business can
Shouldn't
be
be
considered under,
prohibited,
yeah,
You can figure it out. But
Yeah.
in that particular one that I'm talking about, the Finnegan and Sons, it was a picture of their business. But it was a picture of their business 50 years ago, maybe. And it's still there, but they don't operate that business as an auto parts store anymore. But when it was painted on there, it had the name of their business on it as if it was 50 years ago. And I thought, I really liked that. But it wouldn't maybe be allowable under this because it did have the name of their business in it.
well,
But it was a mural, and maybe I'm not
It-
getting it.
yeah, I think that, you know, if the sign area was consistent, it could be done as a creative sign, could, you know, and done that way well. If it's something that, you know, is just amazing and doesn't fit into any kind of category, but is something that we're still going to process a permit for, worst case, it would be done as a conditional use permit.
Okay.
But just to be clear, I think what you're describing would be clearly allowed under the creative sign provision.
Right, except for it says it's not allowed into this section, so how do you get to the creative sign if the mural? I just want to make sure it's not going to completely prohibit that kind of creativity, because in the case that I'm using, I think it's the best mural that Eureka had at the time that it was done, and I still look at it every time I go by. But, you know, so.
Commissioner Scavdall.
I agree. We like murals, I think, in this community,
Yeah.
and there are a lot of nice ones. Another example might be Bucksport Sporting Goods. They have both a wall sign and underneath a mural. The mural doesn't have their name in it, but it clearly depicts outdoor sporting activities and probably certainly relates to what the business is selling. Is it a mural? Is it a sign? Is it both?
And maybe we would say, oh, it's totally okay, but 5 years from now, you know, you're not there anymore, and someone else comes along and goes, oh, no, you can't do it. So I don't know how you write it up. I'm just voicing a concern that maybe you can figure out 2 words that'll change the whole trajectory of this, and allow it. But if it's not the 100% intent to be, but it's part of the creative and not prohibited under murals or whatever, you can come up with the wording.
We'll figure out a way so that they're not mutually exclusive, that, you know, if you can't do it under a mural, you can do it under a creative sign.
All right.
Okay. Commissioner West.
I just wanted to quickly express my appreciation. I really appreciate you adding in the murals and the creative sign sections. I think
Yeah.
this is, like, as much as I expressed earlier that I tend to lean on the conservative side of signs, I think that there is an opportunity for really good-looking signs, and I'm glad that we are trying to incentivize that and allow space for that.
Totally agree. Okay.
So moving down to creative signs, we have this section here. So signs with no more than 40% of the total sign area, digitally printed and of unique design, thoughtfulness, imagination, inventiveness, and spirit, which deviate from the standards in this section while minimizing adverse impacts.
So if you were gonna go to that section, say it's creative, that sign, that mural now that's become a creative sign because you put your name in it, it couldn't be bigger than 40% of the building side?
So this is stating that the, no more than 40% of the total sign area may be digitally printed, which means that it's like a typical sign that may be printed.
But you could still do a giant mural sign, and it could be creative versus mural, or both, a combination of both.
Peggy, can you speak a little closer to the mic?
Sorry.
Thanks.
I just want to make sure I understood the difference between the two. Because you
Yes.
keep saying, well, that's creative, and so then when we get to creative, I was just trying to make sure I understood what creative was.
Yeah, so digitally, what this is doing is it's limiting the digitally printed portion of the sign, not the murals portion of
Okay,
the sign.
not the size of it, okay.
And the alternative to digitally printed would be hand painted, or?
Yeah, so a
I'm
creative
not-
sign could have all types of different, there's different ways to do a creative sign, at least from what this shows as the standard designs, or design standards in general design.
Yeah, no, I was also a little curious about what exactly digitally printed. And maybe, this is something you could bring back a picture so we could, understand a little bit more clearly, okay, this sign, this part's digitally printed and this part's not, or something like that.
I will say I had a hard time with understanding digitally printed as well, so I looked it up. And when I
Okay.
looked it up, the only thing that came up was a standard sign. It's just typical signage that is printed.
We'll re-articulate that.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Oh, do you, okay, on this topic, okay, go ahead, Commissioner Mitchell.
I guess I just want to make sure, is there going to be an opportunity to discuss other potential changes that we want to ask about outside of talking about specific changes that have already been made?
Yes, I mean, anything, and I want that to be clear. I mean, we are going to get another crack at this, of course, but as we go through this, anything that you have a question or comment on, even if it wasn't changed recently or, go ahead. And
I just wanted to ask, when the last time this sign ordinance was updated, or when you speak about the existing ordinance, is that a state or federal or other type of regulation? And the point of me asking is that I want to make sure that as digital and other types of technology continue to advance at a rapid pace, that we don't create additional impacts to wildlife and the environment and to people and their safety. How do we future-proof this policy? Like, is it going to be updated with the general plan, or will updates to the general plan and the, visual impacts in terms of the different elements in the general plan, safety and others, will that trigger this to be updated? And I guess, how do we make sure that the ones that intersect will be consistent?
So this is triggered by the general plan, the sign ordinance. And it's really triggered by three different things. One is that I believe in the open space and conservation element, we were to update the sign ordinance to address billboards. The other is, and something we're working on, is to get the state highways designated as scenic highways. We're working on that as well. There's night sky standards and light pollution, and that's why we're focusing on the amount of light that signs emit and creating performance standards for that. And as we were looking at these, recognizing that our sign ordinance, frankly, is only about 2 or 3 paragraphs long, it does not give good guidance. So we thought, since we're cracking this thing open, not wanting to get into too much scope creep, but to just enable a more definitive process, a better process, more certainty, that's why we brought forward the ordinance revision that we did.
So I guess if I want to educate myself so that I can make sure that what we propose is consistent with the existing general plan policies and chapters, could you, I guess, point to me specific chapters that this may relate to or may be affected by as it's updated on the regular update cycle?
As the general plan is updated, or? Well, the general plan was updated in 2017. And what we're working under right now is the implementation plan for that general plan. And obviously, we're now 7 years later, and we're still trying to get implementation parts done.
So as a follow-up, I know there's a noise chapter, right? Like it focuses on noise. I think this will be simple. If there's a certain study that says, you know, in this type of area, we can have this amount of noise and have it be within the baseline, and in an urban area, it needs to be this level. Is there something that I can look at so that I'm making sure that this is consistent with those overall studies that we have in our records?
Not, well, yeah, the general plan. And if you're asking for references when we bring things forward in terms of what are we implementing, we will. We can do that. We did that in the first staff report. We identified the policy guidance that we had from the general plan. I'm not sure I understand the question beyond that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that I do my homework, and that would be helpful for me in my process. So I'll just talk to you outside of this meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Dunn, and I do want to be mindful of the fact that we do have 2 items pulled from consent. I don't know that they'll take a great deal of time, but we need to leave a bit of time for that before we're done. With that said, let's spend a little bit more time on a few of the other highlights here.
So would you prefer that I read through the creative science section, or do we feel that you've read it and want to make comments?
Yeah, I don't know that you need to read it all through. I like it. But if people have comments about what they think it's missing or is too restrictive or whatever.
I just have a comment. You brought up the scenic byways, and I did work on that for the tribe when I worked for them. If there is a corridor that you're trying to, you know, create a scenic byway, it may have a different standard for signs along that byway route than everywhere else, because you're trying to, as people move through the scenic byway, you're trying to send a certain message, and it might even be the theme of the signs or the type of materials, you know, or the look of them, and that should be given maybe a section in here, you know, that gives you different leeway for the scenic byway.
Agreed. And one of the ways that it's addressed is that we're not allowing new billboards.
Yeah, but it might want to be more than that, you know, like, because you have businesses along the scenic byway as you're going through. So I'm just saying there may be a section for scenic byway that gives you, you know, more discretion to determine that they fit into the theme of your scenic byway. You know, I actually enjoy going into communities that have lower profile signs and not giant billboards, and it makes me feel like you're in a more kind of an exclusive area, but there is no reference to the scenic byway, and if that's your goal, then you might want to have a higher standard along that route.
Okay, yeah, we can definitely look into that. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, good point. Anything else that commissioners want to pull out and discuss or ask about in the creative signs section? I'll say I think it's pretty well structured, that you have the sort of 4 required elements at the top, and then a menu of various other things that it should meet 3 of. That seems like a good way to balance some flexibility and some baseline standards. So maybe that brings us to billboards.
Yes, it does. So moving down, we'll go to existing billboards, where we've updated some of the language that would define what an existing billboard is, so that it does include those billboards that have been lawfully erected, maybe at a time when there was historic highways or before ODA was in effect. And we did some of the language for failure to provide active permits, so that it also includes those that were not, or those that were lawfully erected prior to ODA. and the alternatives for placement. And that's the extent of the changes that we made for existing billboards.
Yes, Commissioner West.
I'm having a little bit of confusion on the alternatives and which one is more conservative. The way that I believe Director Ford was talking earlier, alternative 1 is more conservative than alternative 2. I guess the question that I'm not being able to answer for myself is, does alternative 1 provide for like re-erection in more circumstances than alternative 2, or does alternative 2 provide for more circumstances for re-erection?
Alternative 2 provides for more circumstances for re-erection. This section is based on what would not be allowed.
Yeah, and my only question about this, which I think you've now answered, is the more restrictive one, alternative 1, it does comply with state law. I mean, I know some billboard companies won't like it, but you feel solid that that's defensible?
When we come back to you, there will be some tweaks to this.
To that point?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a concern that this potentially encourages vandalism, in that if we can't re-erect a sign after it's fallen due to vandalism, even if it's in a wetland, I just don't think that's right. So if somebody vandalizes a sign, I think the sign owner should have the right to repair it.
Any other thoughts?
I feel like this is an area that we could go a little bit more strict on the regulations in terms of overall complying and enforcing the Coastal Act provisions in terms of protecting ESHA and other coastal resources. And the last meeting, we spoke a little bit about concerns over the Outdoor Advertising Act and its intersectionality with this provision. And I made a request that we look at it from complying strictly with the Outdoor Advertising Act insofar as not doing anything it prohibits, but also not restricting ourselves from regulating areas that we fear may be, but aren't based on, court and other precedents strictly prohibited. So I just wanted to ask, have there been any changes in here that would address that comment that I made last time? And if so, where? And if not, why not?
And the answer is no, because what we're doing here is basically following law. And the struggle that we're having right now is the way the law is structured is it defines placement. It does not define routine maintenance. Routine maintenance is a galaxy of different things. And I know you're frustrated with that. So are we. But the reality is we have to operate within not only the state law, but all the court cases that come down to interpret state law and apply that. So what we're providing you is the best possible recommendation that we can to keep the county within its regulatory rights and not overstep bounds. And the bounds here do very much tie the county's hands. If it is routine maintenance, and it is the law and the court cases very much limit what a local jurisdiction can do. I think we're finding that there's a little bit more leeway in terms of issuance of building permits, but in terms of discretion to approve or deny like-for-like replacement, not so much. So I know you're frustrated with that, but I hope you'll hear me on that. It's not that we don't want, it's not that we're ignoring you. It's that we're extremely constricted by the state and the laws and the court cases that have been passed.
And just to be clear, I am not frustrated with the staff or the legal counsel or anyone on our end. I find having gray areas frustrating because I struggle to understand what I'm expected to do as a public official. And I know that in accounting, maintenance is a very gray area that we have a lot of protocols in place to ferret out, if you will, people trying to misstate what they're doing for tax advantages or other areas. It's a place we really pay attention to. And I'm not sure that the land use attorneys I've worked with or land use specialists really understand that. And so I think what you're picking up for me is I'm frustrated because it's a gray area inside of a gray area inside of a gray area. How do we know what to do? And I think the lawyers have said, this is clearly okay, this is clearly not, and this is clearly okay, and this is clearly not. But there's sort of several areas that people could potentially abuse coastal resources. And I know that the Coastal Act requires us to only allow disturbance of ESHA for specific reasons. And I don't think maintenance of a billboard is an adequate reason in the Coastal Act. And so I just want to put that out there, that I'm concerned about the accounting meets law meets land use, and there's a bit of a wiggle room there.
So, one, I 100% agree with you. And we have beat this back and forth a lot. And there is one clear bright line, and that is the difference between routine maintenance and placement. That's where the line exists. So one of the things why I said we're probably going to be tweaking this a little bit is we need to wrap our heads a little bit more around placement. And so we're going to be doing that. One of the issues that we're struggling with is routine maintenance, like-for-like replacement, including in the ground, and replacing the piers. If maintenance is that, then we're precluded from regulating that. Okay, that's the, the high level look at this.
And if I could just add some additional potential area for folks to latch onto as someone who's not providing tax or legal advice right now, but just simply as a commissioner in my capacity as a public official, is that for accounting purposes promulgated by the Financial Accounting Standards Board, maintenance is defined as something that is routine in nature, ongoing, and just preserves and maintains what you have. If it extends the useful life or the features, or it protects it better, or does anything new, or extends how long it will last, from an accounting perspective, that would be beyond maintenance. And I would recommend, if any of those things would be helpful to include in our discussions and plans, that would be something that we could latch onto.
We have looked at that. I used the term like-for-like replacement very intentionally because that is written all over the statute and it occurs in case law. And so there is this kind of assumption that if you've got a 6x8 beam and it's starting to get weathered, you have the right to replace it.
And that doesn't constitute new construction, that is maintenance. Because I
Correct.
think what he's saying is what I'm familiar with, when you do a federal project, like a HUD project, they have here's a list of what is new construction, here's a list of what's maintenance. And if you do this, you have to do an environmental, as opposed to if you do the maintenance, you don't.
So sometimes when you look at law, you just have to wonder, how were they able to influence that outcome? Because
But
it's
they may
ut-
not be able to pass the environmental now, whereas they
Well,
didn't
but-
have to then.
It's not then, it's the fact that there is A, law, B, court cases interpreting the law.
Okay.
I mean, it's not what, yeah. I mean, that's what we're constrained by. I don't know how much more clearly I can say it. What's that?
Which one fits the law, one or two?
They both fit the law.
Okay.
But just to be clear, it sounds like you may want to do some tweaking to those alternatives anyway. So,
I'm reserving the right to tweak, yes.
so maybe we should not hold off on even, having a vote on that. We'll see what the tweaked versions come back as. Okay. I do want to say, if we're ready to move on, and I don't want to cut off anybody, but, I do just want to call out the fact that we're coming up on the illumination standards, or the illumination section of design standards. That hasn't changed recently, but just as we're, being conscious of what Mr. Will's comments have been on that, on some sections, Ms. Kalt and the other speaker, whose name I forget, have a couple times or multiple times called out the illumination standards as potentially something that could be tightened, perhaps made more comparable to the city of Eureka. I forget now if there's a distinction between the standards here in the coastal zone versus the inland, but I just basically wanted to put that question to you as you move into that section.
Okay. I have it shared for the next section is actually directional signs, and then when we
Okay,
get down
right.
into,
Sure. Forgot about that, yeah.
that was my bad. So the section that we added here is the directional signs, and this is the same language from the coastal section. Requiring special permit for placement of directional signs in any zone. And that you'll see the design criteria there is 24 by 24 inches for each use. The display surface can include multiple uses, but the maximum aggregate surface is not to exceed 100 square feet.
Okay. Any comments on that or questions, concerns? I think not
All
at this
right.
time. So,
So moving into design standards for illumination, your question regarding whether this is similar to the coastal zone, I used the same language in inland and coastal for
okay.
this section.
Yeah, I thought so, but I just wanted to make sure about that.
Yeah. And we didn't make any changes to this since the last meeting, so there's nothing in this highlighted, but if it is something that you want to touch on, we can.
Well, I guess I just wanted to say it's not just the speakers tonight, but it is something that was referenced in many comment letters, as I recall, when we first came to this, that doing as much as possible to reduce light pollution is one of the important environmental benefits that this ordinance can achieve. So. And I've seen, I don't have it in front of me, but I have seen a letter from Ms. Kalt, Humboldt baykeeper, waterkeeper, that pointed out a couple of particular places that it could be more stringent and a little bit more objective. And I think, it's a valid point to say lowest light level necessary. I mean, I'm not quite sure how specific it's reasonable to be, but I think that's one of the common things that most people I think in the community would agree with, is that we should do all we can to be reducing the night sky pollution.
Well, we can come back with some added language that maybe makes it a little bit more specific or a little bit more, adds more protection.
Yeah, and I'd like to, of course, hear what others think. So Commissioner West.
I had the same train of thought that you did, and pulled up Eureka's, and I would be curious to hear more from Ms. Colt, because when I read the illumination section in Eureka's and the illumination section that staff has put together, they're fairly similar, and I do like I think from what I'm seeing of Eureka's, it is also a little bit lacking in objective standards in the section. They get very detailed in the illumination of digital signs, but since we are not allowing digital signs, that doesn't necessarily apply to this. Something I do like that I think looking specifically at section 87.2.9.11.5, the light source for externally illuminated signs must be shielded in position so that light is only directed at the face of the sign, does not spill beyond where is needed. That is the current section that our staff has put together here. I think in some ways that actually tries to be more conservative than what you see in Eureka's, in that it's basically saying it should only go on the sign and not anywhere else, which I think is great. I do like the specificity. I can't say that word. You know what I'm trying to say. Specificity. Anyways, there is particular call out in the Eureka language talking about protecting environmentally sensitive habitat area and wetlands, and I do think that is worth even though I do think what you have is generally more protective in the way I read it, I do think it's worth calling out specifically protecting environmentally sensitive habitat or wetlands.
Yes, Commissioner O'Neill.
So does this apply to construction zones or, or pedestrian safety? Because I think that illumination signs, when they have been engineered to show that they're promoting safety for pedestrians or some, construction zones, that those should be allowed and not based on our sign ordinance when I don't know anything about it. Whereas maybe somebody's going to come up next year and say, this is a safe sign that promotes, we've determined that this will promote safety of pedestrians. We all know that we have one of the most dangerous corridors for pedestrians. So I don't want to put anything in there that would prohibit. I know they light the heck out of construction. When I leave here, I'm inundated with lights, and I'm a senior, so it really glares. But you need it sometimes, and you should be able to have it where you need it. And I'm not the one to decide, what's safe and not safe in terms of illumination.
In fact, one of the things that Jacob is currently working on is a lighting ordinance, and that'll be coming on the heels of this. This is not intended to regulate.
To prohibit something like that.
It's not to prohibit lighting, it's to regulate lighting associated with signs.
But there are signs in a construction zone that light up and flash and go
Well,
different.
but we're not regulating highway signs.
Okay, so that doesn't fall under what
That
we're doing.
doesn't fall under
Okay.
this.
I have created exceptions for digital and changeable signs and lighted signs that flash, blink, or move or anything like that by allowing the public agency that has jurisdiction can authorize it. And so it's the same thing for under the prohibited signs section. You'll see that for digital animated and changeable copy signs, as well as signs on public roads and signs on public property. Which
So
allow
Public
the
Works had a design, or Caltrans had a design to promote safety, they wouldn't be covered by this, or would be exception to this.
It would be, it'd be an exception.
That's fine.
It's an exception.
Okay, Commissioner Scabdall?
Just one other question. We're not limiting when a sign can be lit, so right now, they can be lit 24 hours a day. As I read this ordinance, is that our intent, or do we want to have any limitations on when a sign can?
Oh, the timeline of when
Yeah.
it can be lit. I do not have anything in here for.
Well, I mean, you probably see this, but point 6, the one that says lighting shall use the lowest light level necessary, and when feasible, lighting should be on demand or shall only operate between sunrise and sunset or 30 minutes after closing, whichever comes first.
So all
Sorry.
night.
If it's you're saying because it's sort of advisory rather than strict?
I'm saying that's what it says, that you can have your sign lit all night,
Even if you're not open.
even if you're not open, right, between sunrise and sunset.
Well, but if I read it to say, although the should is, well, no, the shall is pretty definite. I read it to be saying, shall only operate, until sunset or 30 minutes after closing. So unless you're open all night, if the business doesn't close, then that doesn't apply. But if you close, it seems to be saying you have to turn off lights 30 minutes later.
Okay, maybe I'm not reading this correctly.
Is that-
I would concur with the chair's interpretation of
Yep.
that, and maybe it doesn't help to have a should before a shall.
Okay,
Yeah, or we could separate those a
I
little bit more
understand it
clearly.
is. I see the intent now. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner West.
I touched on it, but I also felt like I was rambling a little bit, so I just wanted to make sure that I had articulated this part a little bit better. Thinking about the line, lighting shall use the lowest light level necessary. Can we explore making that a little bit more objective? It seems like it might be a challenge, but it's worth exploring what that might look like to make it a little bit more objective.
Yeah. Yeah, great, okay. Yeah, so we are running out of time if we're gonna leave a little bit for the pulled items, so just want to note that, and this will be coming back to us. Is there anything more that commissioners may want to comment on in the remaining page and a half, or that Mr. Dunn wants to particularly call out or discuss?
At least in terms of the highlighted portion, it's just the signs on public roads and signs on public property, which was just intended, it was changed to basically enforce the public works as the determining agency for signs on those areas. Or any other public agency that has jurisdiction.
And that would seem to be relevant to Commissioner O'Neill's point that, if there's a sign that's lit up for safety or it's flashing to get your attention because there's pedestrian crossing, we're not restricting that. Yeah. Okay. And I will just say, and I don't know that we have time to really discuss it now, but as I said earlier, I'm not personally convinced that there's no circumstances where roof signs might be allowable and appropriate. Totally take your point that something that is essentially a billboard on top of a roof line, that's obnoxious, but something that is, below the level of the roof line, somehow tailored to the, I don't know, I guess frankly, the example that you showed of the Mountain Mike's Pizza, I was like, I'm not sure which angle, whether you need to have a sign there, if it's the back of the building, okay, that's point taken, but I wonder if there might be a path for certain roof signs below a certain profile within certain limits with a permit.
So one of the things I hear or at least the chair saying, and maybe the commission's in agreement with this, is signs that do not project above the level of the roof. So signs could be, like on that situation, could be located on a false mansard. If that's what you're saying, we can easily modify this to redefine what a roof sign is and allow those kinds of signs.
Could be a certain percentage of the roof too, like Alan's maybe 30%. It wouldn't have to be like as high as the roof, but in that case, it's a pretty low profile roof sign. But it's not,
The struggle is that sign was, and we need to think about some objective criteria.
But that sign wasn't a bad example because it wasn't huge and it was, I think, mounted onto the fascia band. One of the things that often happens when you get a sign on a pitched roof like that or a false mansard is you'll get huge support and bracing because it sits on the roof, and then there'll be all kinds of things behind it holding it up. So you get a lot of clutter in addition to the sign. And it's not attractive. And so it really is a question for you as the commission to weigh is what do you want to do with the regulation of signage? Do you want to require the building design to consider where the signage is going to go and have the signage placed there and really encourage that by the way the sign ordinance is structured? Or is that not very important? I'll just leave it at that. And I know we've got other items to get to.
Yeah. Okay, well, so should we leave it here then for now? And we've given you plenty. Hopefully we have settled a lot and covered a lot of ground we won't have to go over again. But I know we've given you some new requests for revisions. So with that, I guess I would just ask when would be an appropriate date to continue this to?
February 15th.
Okay. Can we get a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Mitchell.
I just want to note, I will be absent at the February 15th meeting.
Oh.
But it's
Okay.
okay. I'm not going to second it.
Seconded.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. But yeah, we have a motion by Commissioner Mitchell, seconded by Commissioner Landry to continue to February 15th. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Okay. Motion passes 5-1. Thanks so much, Mr. Dunn, for your work on this. I really think it's gotten to a pretty good place. So, returning to the agenda, we are now coming to items pulled from consent. There were two of those. First one was Ghost Ship Investments. And that was pulled by 7108, if I'm not mistaken, a member of the public who's still on the call. So I guess I'll ask the commission. Do the commissioners, it wasn't any of you who pulled this, do any of you wish to have a staff report, or shall we just take public comment? Just public comment? Yeah.
Yes.
That works, Director Forden?
That works for me. The commission did agree upon a protocol, though, if it's pulled by a commissioner and it's just a question, that you wouldn't do it, given the lateness of the night, though, forget protocol.
Yeah, okay. You're
Sorry.
right, but if it's pulled by a member of the public, we would do a staff report.
Right.
That's true. I mean, we could have, well, okay, but given the lateness of the night, let's just say, since the commissioners don't have questions, let's just open up public comment on the Ghost Ship Investments LLC conditional use permit. And then if there is comments, questions raised, staff can respond appropriately. So yes, I see one hand raised, 7108. Thank you for your patience. Go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Thanks for taking my call. I have a few things about this particular project, starting with the executive summary, which says that the project is conditioned to transition to PG&E or on-site renewable by January 1st of 2026. Later in the staff report for item A7 of conditions of approval, it says the end of 2026. So there's an inconsistency, and it shows up in a couple places. Another item is that there's no watershed map and there were watershed maps included in applications, and I think it would be really helpful to have them again so everybody can see the general status of the watershed and permits. Let me see. I'm a bit concerned about the 5 generators and the 8 growth sites and how all those generators are going to work out and be fire safe. One of them's supposed to be for a water pump. So I don't know, 8 locations, including drying and curing. So that was the question. And then just a general question of adding ancillary propagation. I was looking through the 1.0 ordinance, and I didn't see anything in there about ancillary propagation. That showed up in the 2.0 ordinance. So I'm wondering how something in the 2.0 ordinance is ending up for 1.0 applicants. Okay, I guess that's my comments. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your careful reading of the material and for patiently waiting for this item to come up. I guess I'd like to ask if staff, well, I'll just echo one part of that caller's comment, which is that I did notice the inconsistency between the staff report, at least one place where it says.
Chair, could I just offer that we should probably finish taking public comment?
You're so right. Thank you so much. I should have held off till we're done with that. Yes. Thank you. Is there anyone else, either in the room or on Zoom or phone, wishing to comment on this item? Okay. Seeing no hands up, then we will close public comment. And I'll just say, I noticed the inconsistency about the date of when the transition to renewable must occur. I was less concerned about the being, I looked at the conditions of approval. That's where they really matter. So I'm not terribly concerned that the staff report said January 1st, 2026, whereas the conditions say end of 2026. I did notice, however, though, that in another, I think the next item, which we're not discussing, we've already passed it on consent, Organic Humboldt LLC, that has them transitioned by January 1st, 2026. And so that did raise the question of, shouldn't we be consistent, and which was it meant to be?
Yeah. We have been pretty consistent with doing this to January 1st of 2026. And so to just be completely honest, I think I was working on this last week, had it open on my computer, and ended up getting pretty sick and not being in until early this week. I think that in a scramble to try to get this forward, I think our staff put together something that didn't quite reach our typical level of professionalism. So what I would just recommend is that we make that change, that it be transitioned to solar by January 1st, 2026. That is consistent with what the Planning Commission has been doing for many years.
Yeah.
And that really was the intent, even though that is not shown here.
Great. No, mistakes happen. No worries, but that would make sense to me. Okay. While we have you there, did anybody else have any further comments or questions about this project? Okay, and I'll just say that I take your point about the amount of water storage that CDFW was recommending seemed higher than what was strictly warranted according to your calculations, but we're going to go along with that recommendation anyway, and I'm fine with that. So If there's nothing else on this one, then I guess we could get a motion to approve it.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner O'Neill, seconded by Commissioner Mitchell. Any further discussion before we vote? All right, then I think a voice vote will do. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? Nope. Motion passes unanimously. Ghost Ship Investments, Ghost Ship Investments in Corbell is approved with the recommended conditions and with the one changed condition to, as Mr. Johnson specified. And then the last item pulled from consent was the Bush parcel map subdivision. I think we have time for a brief staff report on that. And then I'll see if there's public comment.
Apologies, Chair. I think I just lost my Zoom, so I can either rejoin and share this presentation, which really is just a couple slides showing the property in question, or I can just give a verbal presentation, if that would suffice for everybody.
Verbal seems okay? Yeah, sure.
Okay. So this is a minor subdivision of a single parcel. It's 6.3 acres in the Hydesville area. It's approximately half a mile north of Highway 36. It's into two parcels of 2.5 acres and 3.8 acres. And the zoning and the general plan in this area both call for a density and a minimum parcel size of 2.5 acres, so it's consistent with that. What this is really doing is putting a line essentially down the middle of the parcel. The parcel is currently developed with two residences, one that was constructed as the main residence and one that was constructed as the accessory dwelling unit, and this would separate them both out onto their own parcels. The property is located off of Chuck Hole Lane, which is currently approximately 12 feet wide. And so the applicant did obtain an exception request, or I should say an exception from CAL FIRE for that right-of-way, or for that road access to be less than the required 20 feet under the fire safe requirements. They also did obtain a fire safe exception to exceed the maximum length of a dead-end road. The dead-end road length in this area from Highway 36 to the property is just over 2,900 feet. And under the fire safe regulations, the minimum, or I should say the maximum without an exception would be 2,620 feet. CAL FIRE did approve both of those exceptions, noting that there's really no additional development that's proposed here. And the county's Public Works Department is also recommending approval of an exception to the road width as well, because 12 feet is not consistent with the minimum road standards. It would be required to be 20 feet, but again, an exception can be granted, and Public Works is supporting that, given that there's no additional development that's proposed here. Properties are served by the Hydesville Community Service District for water, and they do have on-site septic systems. I will note that there was a number of comments that were submitted, which generally raised concern about additional development. I did have a conversation with some members of the public that were here before the meeting, and it appears that they were not clear that there was no additional development proposed, and this was just separating each of those two residences onto their own parcel. You'll note from the public comments, they were related primarily to traffic and the capability of the road to support additional development, as well as the potential for the water district to provide additional water, but there is no additional development proposed as part of this subdivision. With that, I'd going to conclude, and happy to answer any questions.
Sure. Question from Commissioner Landry.
Thank you for your report. And could you give us an update of your understanding of the culvert situation?
Sure. So this is not something that we'd looked at because there was no road improvements that were determined to be necessary to support the subdivision if the exceptions get granted. And so the first that's come to our attention was through the public comments that were submitted, I think, yesterday. It appears that there are 2 culverts on the road. It is a private road system, and so the landowners that share the road system would be responsible for maintaining and improving those culverts. That is something that we would typically look at if there were road improvements that were needed, that they may have to do additional road improvements. So it wasn't something that was reviewed as part of the subdivision.
Yes.
And so the reality of the proposal isn't going to be increasing the traffic and whatnot. Is that what I'm understanding?
That is correct. So in all transparency, by dividing the parcel and creating 2 parcels, each of those parcels would be able to potentially construct an accessory dwelling unit. So there could be 2 additional dwellings that would be constructed. That's not proposed here. It has not been analyzed to see if that's feasible given the potential of the property to support septic systems. And further, I will note that there is a couple of constraints that could potentially apply to further development. This is in an Alquist-Priolo fault hazard zone where and so we are recommending a condition that would record a development plan on the property such that any future development needs to prepare a fault evaluation report to show that any development can safely be accommodated there. In addition, there is some potential of this area to support to have cultural resources, and no cultural resource investigation was prepared given that no development is proposed. And so as part of that development plan, we would also want to see that a cultural resources survey has been submitted and shows that it can be safely developed. But again, no development is proposed, but that does have the potential in the future to support 2 additional units if all of the circumstances were to align.
Understood. Yes, Commissioner O'Neill.
A question on that cultural resources. So the people are made aware that that is a condition, and let's say they decide to sell the units, then they have to do they have to disclose that that's a condition of future development?
So, yes, basically by recording a development plan, a notice of development plan gets recorded on the title to the properties. And so it will identify, it'll come up in a title search that there is this development plan with development restrictions on file at the county. So anybody doing their due diligence should be aware of that.
Commissioner West.
When I read the public comments on this, I read a lot of, I think, what I interpreted to be confusion about like what you mentioned, that that this was a plan to develop these properties further, and so I just wanted to. I pulled this item to, I think, like, have you say that, like, in a public forum so that anybody who's curious watching would see that and hear that, and I'm going to restate it again just to make sure I'm understanding correctly that, like, when people are concerned about, like, the water district's capacity, the ability of the water district to serve any new development would be analyzed at the time that development was proposed, and it is not being proposed now, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
If there's no further questions at this time, I do just want to invite public comment for anyone still with us who may wish to comment. So, yes, thank you so much for your patience. Please go ahead.
How do
And,
you turn this on?
it should be on. You might just need to move the mic should be working. You might just have to move it a little, bend it down a little.
My name is Nancy Bush. I live at 250 Chuckle Road. The Planning Department, Building Department, as well as the Public Works are here to help people like us not to come up with unreasonable problems to stop us. The access drainage, the water on the road was the water on the road comes down from the construction on the top of the hill, from the homes that live up there. And the property next to us is sloped down to our property, which causes their water to run onto us. Public Works Inspector came out during a flood stage, and he said he didn't want us to put in a French drain, as they would require a hydraulic study report. This will cost thousands of dollars and a whole lot of time. It's not our water. No water comes off our land onto any other parcels. Hazardous, as CAL FIRE said in the report, we live in a generally low-risk fire area, and in the county's report, it says very high fire hazard zone. That's not true. Culture resources, the county wrote no approval until a culture resource survey had been completed. The report you will find in the folder from the Native American Resources say the proposed project area has a low possibility of containing anything on site, and therefore no further study for resource is recommended. Hazardous zone, as stated by the county reports, both homes are exempt from the requirements to prepare a study. That's in their reports. Therefore, a fault evaluation report was not required. Our home was built in 1977 and has gone through many earthquakes over the years. The ADU has been there for 3 years and has gone through the 6-point earthquake with no damage. In fact, my parents slept through the whole thing. Sorry, I'm getting nervous. They want to stop all improvements on both parcels and for us to have to sign a paper that depreciates the value of our property and puts a cloud over the deeds of both parcels. If at any time someone would like to improve by adding a barn or greenhouse, they would have to apply for a permit from the county anyway. Looks like the people from the county, for some reason, has it in for us. We started this on February of 2023 and still waiting for the county to do their job.
You actually can go longer. I didn't realize you were the applicant, and applicants can have additional time as needed.
Okay, I
to
just
make
have one more paragraph. If we were to drop our subdivision and rent the house and live in the ADU, we would not have to do any of what the county is asking us to do. If someone could live in the house as a renter but cannot buy the house, has any living conditions changed? We have moved no dirt or added any buildings. All we are asking is to downsize and let someone buy our home and make it theirs. We are retired on a fixed income and cannot afford thousands of dollars to fix something that doesn't exist. We are asking for your common sense in dealing with the county. All we are doing is adding a new fence across the center of our property to make 2 parcels.
Thank you. Sir, did you wish to speak as well?
Yes, please. I'm Nancy's husband.
Okay.
I have copies of what I'm going to read. If you want them, you're welcome to them.
Sure. If you could give those to Laura, she'll pass them out. Thank you.
Who should I give this to?
Right here.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Ron Bush. I want to thank all of the members of the commission for giving my wife Nancy and I this opportunity to speak with you in regards to item 8 on your agenda, labeled E, consent agenda, the Bush parcel map subdivision. Please note that we are preceded by 6 agenda items. 5 through 7 all were for cannabis-related issues. Nancy pointed that out already. When we inquired at the Planning Department counter on November the 23rd as to why we have been delayed one whole year, we were told by a county employee that we have been understaffed with a backlog of work, so cannabis-related items have been given priority because they generate revenue. Not a good thing to tell us. That employee left to get a planner that could give us more information on our concern. We were introduced to Mr. Holterman, our new assigned planner, number 5, and Kathleen Johnston, his co-worker. Mr. Holterman has done an excellent job of helping us. He is courteous, astute, responsive, and very helpful. My wife did a great job of addressing the majority of the issues of concern to us, so I will just cut to the chase. Please turn to page 2 of your file under hazards, paragraph 1. Please note in the last sentence that the county is recommending a condition of approval that requires us to convey our rights to further residential development to the county until such time that a fault evaluation report has been completed for any areas within the Alquist-Priolo hazard zone targeted for future development on the resulting parcels with an S. That's a capital S. Now see under cultural resources that statement occurs again in the last sentence. It's still the same requirement. Well, we refuse to be bullied into that by unfair county requirements and bias county treatment. It's not necessary and completely unreasonable. The definition of conveying rights is property conveyance, often called transfer of real estate, involves the legal procedure of changing property ownership from one person or entity to another. I spoke with our title company representative and they assured us that it will cast a permanent cloud on our deeds of trust for the 2 parcels. Only one of them is in the Alquist-Priolo zone. The other one is not. That's our primary residence now. New parcels, trust the 2 new parcels. Anyway, new parcels in turn will devaluate them as well. That's what we were told by our trust company. As Nancy has already stated, we are on fixed income. We are seniors and trying to downsize. We don't have the energy to be landlords, nor do we wish to. We are asking for an unconditional approval. We tried to subdivide our property in 1993, 30 years ago, to help our children get a start in life. However, the county told us no. To our dismay and unbeknownst to us, as we had a fault hazard zone on our property placed there subtly by the federal and state requirements. Our neighbors are still not aware of this to this day. My wife and daughter tried to apply again with the county in about 2003. No again. In 2012, while I was discussing this earthquake fault zone with a county senior planner, he said, yes, you can place a second dwelling unit in the fault zone because they're exempt from that constraint. So, in 2019, we submitted an application for an ADU to be placed in that fault zone area. After much county red tape, a year and 5 months later, we moved my wife's folks into their new home. That home is complete and move-in ready without any development or improvement at all. No groundbreaking. All infrastructure is in place. All we need is to have it surveyed, recorded without conveyance requirements, and move a line fence. Simple lot line adjustment. No development required. We aren't developing anything. Furthermore, why is our right to developing either of our properties in the future being challenged? We have a legal right to apply for a permit to develop our properties in the future at our discretion, the same as any other resident of the county and state. We are asking this within the spirit of the law, state and local, in an attempt to provide affordable housing affordable housing. In so doing, we are being singled out by what we consider to be bias on the part of the county, but we can't understand why. Now, here we are, 1 year after we filed our application to subdivide at no fault of ours, pleading our case. Kudos to the Department of Public Works for submitting their memo to the Planning Department just 30 days, March 23rd of 23. However, we didn't receive a copy of that memo until September of 2023, 6 months later. If we were going to do any grading or drainage work, we had lost our window of opportunity at no fault to the Public Works, and this is how the whole process has gone, at no fault of ours. But the county is denying us help and the right to do this and attempting to burden us with unnecessary requirements. Hey, all this stuff would be required of any person trying to develop a piece of property in Humboldt County anyway. Our county supervisor, our engineer, and our county employees can't understand, and other county employees can't understand or rationalize the necessity of this either. So, what's all the fuss about? Please, do the right thing. Help us. We're not asking for the moon. Excuse me. We don't believe in the good old boy system. We believe in a good neighbor system. We've shared in common with our 9 neighbors for over 45 years our access road and drainage issues. Never an access problem, vehicle accident. No more vehicle traffic will be added to our access roads by approval of our application. Thanks to all of you for your kind attention. Nancy and I truly appreciate that you serve on this Planning Commission board. We are proud to be responsible Humboldt County residents for 53 years. Our kindest regards, Nancy and Ronnie Bush. Respectfully submitted.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I do just want to make sure that the couple of people remaining on phone and Zoom don't wish to comment. If you do, please raise your hand. John is. Okay. Seeing no hands raised on Zoom and nobody else in the room, we will close public comment and bring it back to the staff to respond to this.
Thank you. I wanted to explain a couple things. And first of all, Mr. Bush is correct that the ADU was exempt. Creating a new lot is not exempt from the Alquist-Priolo Act. And so what the staff had done in talking to Mr. Bush was understood that no development was proposed. And so if no development was proposed, then we didn't have to do the study. And so we would just condition it that no additional development would be allowed or convey the development rights until such a time as somebody wanted to do that study, if they wanted to do an ADU on the property. The original cultural analysis that was done for the second unit was only done for the area around the second unit. It did not clear the entire parcels or parcel. Well, yeah, it was actually a review by the TIPO who came out and looked at it and said, no, we're okay with that. So it was not completely cleared. After talking to Mr. Bush, he didn't want to give up or convey development rights. I modified the condition to read that a development plan would need to be recorded on the parcel so that people would be aware that these parcels are created without having done the Alquist-Priolo study, that was still a requirement, and that any new development would require a new cultural analysis. So I apologize, I did not change the staff report, but the condition has been changed. It requires the development plan be recorded, not a conveyance of development rights. And then secondly, didn't expect this tonight. Some of what Mr. Bush just said directly
contradicted what we just told the neighbors, and they went home, thinking this was going to stay on consent. And so we would recommend that you continue it, allow us to renotice it, to allow the public to fairly represent themselves if they have concerns, because there were 3 or 4 neighbors here earlier.
Okay.
I'm totally confused. I don't know if it's the hour of the night, but originally we were told that we're just subdividing and there's no new development, right? But now you're saying based on what they just said, they could be future development?
Yeah, no, they're saying that there's no new development, but don't hold us to that.
Well, wouldn't that be addressed at the time someone proposed new development, that
Right.
that they would have to do these studies? And I don't understand.
So the new development, let me be as clear as I possibly can. The time that studies are normally done to create a parcel is when the parcel's being created. So the Alquist Priolo study would be done now. You would be able to review that now. The cultural analysis would be done now. And the reason for that is that when you create parcels, you're creating a development envelope. You're demonstrating that this is a developable parcel. And under current law, we should be looking to see that a parcel will not only support a primary dwelling unit, but an accessory dwelling unit, because both are allowed by right once the parcel's created. So this is the time that that analysis would normally be done. Staff, in order to expedite this and to not require the Bushes to do expensive studies, was looking to condition it, saying that if you do want to put ADUs on the property in the future, you need to do the studies that you otherwise would have had to do for the parcel map.
We'd have to do them anyway.
Sir, but yes, please, we're bringing it back to the staff for discussion
Yeah.
now.
So when this one sentence in here that says a recommended condition of approval requires the applicant to convey rights for further, what is that? Are you saying that that's no longer?
I changed that
that.
condition
Okay.
to simply require a development plan be recorded on the property, so that, as your question to Mr. Johnson is, if the property changes hands, will people know?
Okay.
And the answer to that is yes, because that development plan would show up on title, just saying that if you want to do something in the future, this is what you've got to do.
I get
It's
it.
not a conveyance of development rights.
Wouldn't that apply to anybody?
Sir, please, you've had your chance to speak. We don't do a back and forth at this stage. Yes, Commissioner Scabdell.
Does that development plan need to be created only for the one new parcel being created, or for both parcels?
For both parcels, because both parcels could now have an accessory dwelling unit.
Okay. And another question linked. Are both parcels as created in the Alquist Priolo zone? Because I heard the applicant state that one parcel was not.
You know, I managed to get Zoom back up, I think. I'd be happy to share my screen with the official maps. Both parcels are in the Alquist Priolo. It is true that the northernmost parcel, not all of it is, but there is some development area that could, be within that zone. So this should be able to be coming up here. And this is showing both the fire hazard zones and the Alquist Priolo zone, because there was a mention about this not being in the high fire hazard area. If you're following my cursor, this is the parcel right here. So you can see most of it is in Alquist Priolo. That's both of the proposed parcels. And they also straddle the moderate to high fire hazard severity.
Commissioner West, and then Commissioner Mitchell.
Thank you. I wanted to just take a second to recognize, really heard the applicant's frustration and concerns, and appreciate you being here tonight and sharing your perspective. it's always a lot to consider, and it's also, from your end, it's very hard to come up and speak at the podium. So I just wanted to acknowledge your time sitting through the rest of our meeting and sharing your concerns, and that we are hearing them, and trying to find the best possible solution that also meets the requirements of the county's due diligence and state law. And I wanted to just, I think, restate, to clarify, to make sure I'm understanding correctly, that staff is saying that typically, like, when you subdivide, you're vesting rights into 2 properties instead of 1, and so you're requiring a due diligence being done at that time, because you're like, to split the property into 2 means that you could add ostensibly 2 new ADU units onto it. So that's why there are these extra considerations that come into play. Is that correct? I think I'm stating that to make sure I'm
That's
understanding
absolutely
correctly.
correct.
Okay, yeah. That was really it. I just wanted to make sure I was following and to acknowledge that we hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to add that it sounded like the original concern stemmed from a title officer. These folks are very conservative and deal with lots of problematic types of these that can be recorded. And if there's any gray area in them, especially older ones, they can be confusing. I've had to go through searches of basements trying to find a document that's been recorded, but newer items don't have those types of problems. And my understanding is that we do these types of requirements because it's less expensive to develop housing. And as long as they've had the opportunity to either get the study or have the item recorded, it seems like a very fair way to help a property owner develop additional units for housing at a lower price. So I plan to support this, and I really appreciate the points that you brought forward, and I think we found a really good balance with staff's change here. Thank you very much.
I'd like to ask, though, I'm unclear what about the testimony from the applicants or any further discussion that we've had made you feel that the neighbors had been given the wrong impression and went home? Because that's the part I'm not clear about.
No new development.
But that is still, whether it's in the form of conveyance of property rights, development rights, until the fault study's done, or the attachment of a development plan, which would make that a precondition of any permanent development, as I understand it, that amounts to the same thing. There's no plan for new development now, and that condition has to be met before it can occur.
So when you're creating a parcel map, I think Commissioner West said it very, very well. You are creating a new entitlement for additional development that does not exist now. That new entitlement in this particular case does have a hurdle, which is to do these studies. But the entitlement exists nonetheless. So when you're creating a new entitlement, when you create a lot split.
Okay, so even though there is no development planned or permitted at this time, you think they were given the false impression that there was no potential for future development, and that's why they...
Let Mr. Johnson give his perception.
Okay.
So I want to be really careful with what I say, because I think the neighbors had expressed some concern relative to the property owner's intentions with future development. And I assured them that they have no interest in doing future development. They would accept a condition that would make it clear that future development is going to have to require additional studies, and I'm concerned personally that I misled them, given what I heard from the applicant. And so from my conversations with the neighbors earlier tonight, I'm pretty convinced that they would want to make comment, given what I've heard from the property owner.
But doesn't it matter what we approve, not what they said? And just
I
for
think-
your, I want to say one thing. I built an ADU and the county required me to do flood studies. And it, I had to do one before the building and one after the building. I didn't like it, but it's what I had to do. And it took well over a year to get my permit. So it's not that they're discriminating against you. They're looking out for the safety of the community. And even though the earthquake that you've already experienced may not have been devastating, it doesn't mean in the future that it couldn't be. And so they're looking out for the safety of people and anyone who would potentially buy that property. And the Almquist Priola is it's a real hazard, just like the flood is a real hazard. And so, often we don't want, things like that on our deed, or we don't want to have to comply, but it's there for a reason, and it's not just singling out one property owner over another. But I think if we approve something tonight, they may not like it and they can appeal it, but that doesn't mean you'd have to go back through the whole process or postpone it.
I just want to say, I personally believe that they would have comment given what they heard, given my conversation with them. And so I'm concerned that you would be limiting their ability, because I personally feel like I misrepresented some of the property owner's intentions. And I don't want to speak for the neighbors, but I do think that they would have some comments given what the property owner said.
Okay. Commissioner Mitchell.
So while it sounds like we're all in agreement in this room as far as what the staff's recommendation and what a lot of us have said, there may be a due process issue in terms of just making sure everyone has an opportunity to be heard before a decision is made. Is that what we're asking to defer for?
Chair, why they are discussing, I just want to note, I am interested in asking the applicant a couple questions. I know we're coming up of time, so I just want, it doesn't have to be tonight. I just want to acknowledge that there's more there for me.
Sure. Thanks for that. And I was wondering if that, I think if we were going to make a decision tonight, we should do that. If we're going to continue it, maybe not. But if you'd like to, I will give you that discretion if you'd like to ask a question tonight. I think we should first let them.
So I think the decision to make tonight is yours. The community was here. They were able to comment. We're probably being more conservative than is necessary in bringing this up. If the commission feels comfortable taking action with the conditions tonight, we're willing to stand behind that.
Okay. I know we are over time, but Commissioner West is requesting to ask a question of the applicant, of one of you, which we sometimes do. If we have additional questions, we'll call you back up. So would you like to go ahead and do that?
I think so. We're just, it's hard when we run out of time, and I feel like I will do my best. Okay, so I heard you say that the county is denying.
Let me just ask Mr. Bush to come up to the mic so that your response can be heard and seen. Thank you.
And Mr. Bush, I apologize. I'm going to ask you a question that, you are probably going to want to answer in detail, and we are running out of time, so I think just want to acknowledge that we're going to have to keep it short, and I'm sorry for that.
I apologize for my outburst. I'm sorry about that.
So I just wanted to, I saw and heard you say that the county is denying you help, and I didn't want to just rush over that. Could you elaborate in a couple of sentences what you mean by the county is denying you help?
I'm going to try to answer that the best way I know how. However, if you did a study and it came out negative, what do? Move the house? The house is in place. It's in the zone. What good does it do to do the study now? It's there. There's a garage. There's a house. There's fences. the whole deal. The study wouldn't do you much good, but we've been working on this for 30 years. 30 years, since 1993. And we've run into some real negative people that will meet you at the counter and just wait for you to say something, and they'll just hit the big no button. And there's no real reason for that. We're no different than anybody else here in the county. If you had an ADU that you just had done and you go through the permit process, we did all that when we put it in. We had no intention, we didn't even think that we were going to go ahead and try to subdivide. But my wife and I discussed it, and we decided that we would go ahead and pursue it because my father-in-law insisted on us giving him property, and he wanted to buy the property. Well, I couldn't tell him that we could do it. I told him we couldn't because the county won't let us. So, and we've gotten very little cooperation. I've tried to have meetings early on, and I would say good luck with that one. That was one of the comments I got. I mean, it was just, you can't get any help. And what I have come across, I worked in the planning department for 8 years. I was a senior custodian, and I saw the secondary dwelling unit thing and the second dwelling deal, and that changed in 2020, January the 1st, that all changed from second dwelling unit and secondary dwelling unit to ADU and junior ADU. And they put different restrictions and stuff on it. And hey, that's fine. But we were ready to move on the first day of January, and the county plan was in place, the ordinances were in place, and they just froze it. Shouldn't it be enforced until it is corrected? But I was just said, good luck with that. So we had to wait. We had to wait until that all got sorted out, and just delayed everything. My in-laws were stuck in Seattle and wondering what was going on. We ordered an ADU, and it's coming, and we don't have a permit yet. So,
sir, if I could ask you to just sort of wrap it up.
Okay.
I mean, I understand it's a complicated story.
Okay, excuse me.
Simply because we're supposed to be out of this room by 9:30 and it's 9:40. That's the reason why we're trying to resolve this one way or the other.
Nothing's changing, and the county knows that. Nothing's changing. It's all staying the same. All we're doing is moving a fence. That's it. Mm-hmm. You have to survey it to move the fence to make it correct and record it, granted. But all we're doing is moving a fence. Everything's in place. We're not, we don't have intentions, and I told the county that, we don't have intentions to develop, but we have a right to, like anybody else. All I have to do is go file ask for a permit or file an application, and I'd have to jump through all the hoops. Well, you have to do an Alquist-Priolo study, and all that stuff would surface. Why put that on our deeds and hold us to that? It's not fair, even to the people that purchase from us.
I think I understand. I hear, what I'm hearing you say is that you feel like this is an unfair restriction to have come now because you feel like it will come with the building. But what we're hearing from our staff is that this restriction comes now and does not come with, by making the decision to subdivide, we are conveying the right to you to build, and that is the decision we are making tonight.
I understand that.
And I don't think we can do much more back and forth. Thank you for answering my question.
The building's done. It's
Yes.
there. We don't plan to go over there and put another ADU or anything else. At least that's not our intention. But we have a right in the future, if we felt that we wanted to, we should have that right. But not to have that right taken away from us by signing some document. And anybody that comes in and purchases our land, there would be no cloud over it. So this is all unnecessary. You'd have to, anybody that bought that land would have to jump through the same hoops I would.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much for coming back up. We appreciate your time.
So I just think this comes down to what's legally required. And if it's legally required, if it's part of the law right now that you must do either this or that, we just need to follow the law.
Right.
And it may seem discriminatory But, I mean, nobody told me on my deed I had to do a flood study if I
Right.
built, but I had to do it, you know, and I wish I would have known when I bought it, because I might not have bought the property, because now my insurance is higher, you know, and there's other ramifications that you'd want to know in advance.
Right.
Could I respond to that?
Yes.
So to be abundantly clear, once you approve this parcel map, there is an entitlement to build an ADU on each parcel. Okay? So normally, the Alquist Priolo study would be done now. Normally, the cultural resource analysis would be done now.
Right.
So that you can grant that entitlement to allow those things to occur.
She can't get insurance either. And if I would have known that when I bought my property because it was on my deed, then I might have bought it anyway, but I would have been informed when I bought it. And I didn't know that as soon as I bought my property, I couldn't get flood insurance. You know, so those are things that are important to know, even though it doesn't, you know, seems, you know, hard on you to have that information on your deed. The future buyer mightn't want to know because they can't get insurance. They might not be able to build where they think they're going to build, and so it's there for a reason. And if it's the law, we have to follow it, whether it feels good or not. If it's required, we have to do it.
So if I may just, it seems that given those requirements, the solution you've crafted that you're proposing is the least onerous on them now, that because you've explained pretty clearly why we can't just allow the split without some condition that will be triggered upon future development plans. So
That's what that's what has been attempted here.
Yeah.
Is to create a pathway that is the least onerous.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think the applicant can withdraw and do the studies now, or if they proceed, then they're gonna have to be noticed that the future studies are required.
Yeah.
And the title company's any buyer is gonna be notified that the property's in the Aquas Priola zone.
Exactly.
You can't avoid that.
That's
It's
gonna be
happen automatically.
it's going to be
Okay?
disclosed one way or the other.
Yeah, so, I think those are the only two options. We either proceed as the county has recommended, or the applicant can withdraw and do the studies now.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I always find it difficult to know where to land when I know that there's a piece of information that I don't know, but here's to what you do know, make a decision. That makes me very uncomfortable. And so I just want to make sure that we as the county or you as the staff don't have any information that the other public speakers who appear to be here to plan to testify to provide us additional information, that they weren't going to talk about anything other than this specific document and restriction that will be on the deed. If they had any concerns about noise or any other types of impact, I feel I wouldn't have enough information to decide. So can staff just please affirmatively tell me that there's no other issues that have been raised whatsoever?
I don't think we can say that, I'm sorry. I mean, it's really inappropriate for us to say anything positive or negative about what the members of the public would say. That's putting ourselves interpreting and reconveying their comments. You do have their comments largely in writing.
So I guess I just feel like I don't have enough information to vote affirmatively for this. While I believe that we have reached the right conclusion, I just feel like I haven't considered what they may have said tonight. And since we were clear about we were clear about being very specific about what you will say, I just don't want to assume. Thank you.
Mr.
I
Scavdon?
will also just want to add, I did drive by. It's a beautiful piece of property. It's a nice area. I don't know how they got the name Chuck Hole Road. It's a beautiful road. It's well paved and maintained. I totally understand what the applicant's trying to do in dividing the two pieces of property. Makes perfect sense. So,
I guess my personal opinion was that given the conditions that would be attached, given the statement that there is no intention to develop now or anytime in the foreseeable future, and that there will be conditions that will be triggered if that should occur, I'm comfortable moving ahead with the approval tonight without renoticing it and bringing back people, because I think that they probably did get, I'm not really hearing that there was anything terribly inaccurate that would have been conveyed. I know I wasn't privy to your conversations, but if council and staff are willing to allow that as an option, I would personally support that option. Yes, with the condition.
If they want to pull their application and come back after they've had more time to think about it, then that's fine. But
Yeah.
right now, if I approve anything, it's going to be what staff recommended.
Right.
Because staff has given them a pass. And I'm a homeowner that bought a property that got a pass by the county, and now I can't get flood insurance because they allowed my house to be built after the deadline. So I understand as a potential buyer to not have been notified and now cannot get insurance, that it is a big deal.
Sure. And it's not conveying development rights, it's simply recording a development plan.
And
So,
it doesn't mean someone won't buy the property, but they need to know.
yeah. Commissioner Mitchell.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to add really quickly, I would be more concerned if I were that applicant that by approving this, by creating an additional title issue, by not recording it after the date, that we could actually be reducing their property value and thus potentially not achieving the investment objectives that they may have had. So
Then they have the right to pull and do the studies, like he said, and follow the law.
Yes, absolutely they do.
Yeah. Okay. So we got to resolve this one way or the other.
I think this is, oh, excuse me, Chair, right?
Yeah, please.
This is a tough one, I think. I also heard from the applicant that this process has already taken a long time for them. So I think, given the sum, I'm comfortable moving forward with staff's recommendation and would move to approve the application as recommended by staff.
Thank you, Commissioner West, for that motion.
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Scavdall. Any further discussion? Then I guess I would invite a voice vote. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
no.
Okay, so we have 5-1. The motion passes. Sorry, Commissioner Mitchell was the no. Yes. Okay, well, thank you. And with that, I do always like to ask if there's any report from planner that you want to give in
Not at this time.
30 seconds or a minute? Okay. All right. Then thank you all for your patience and for staying a little long tonight, and we will adjourn now at 9:50.